Hey, did all of you guys see? That was weird. All right, hang on. Did you guys see the, I sent an announcement this morning with another file for you to download. Did you guys see that by any chance?
Yeah.
All right, just make sure you did. So there was a download from yesterday and another one from today. They're just some working files that we can look at so that you guys can look at and go through exactly the same thing that I'm looking at and going through. So we'll give it a couple minutes to see who else shows up, and then we'll jump in. How is everyone?
Alive.
Alive. Well.
Yeah, we've reached that status.
Yeah. Well, better than the alternative, right?
Yeah, we're doing okay.
Love to hear that.
Yeah, we're getting there. How are you doing?
I'm not doing too bad. So Kaylee, I feel like you and Ellie are on opposite sides of the same room. And there's this light curtain in between the two of you.
I mean, I don't see her, so I don't know where she's at.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, it does.
Right?
As I'm scrolling across the bottom of my screen.
We're almost there, guys. Hang on. How do you guys feel about morning classes?
I hate them.
So do I. Anyone else?
I hate them part 2.
It's better over Zoom. I'm still sitting in bed.
Yeah, there's that. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I was just like, when they were doing my schedule, I had said to them, I don't want to do nights and I don't want to do Saturdays. I just want to do afternoons. And they're like, okay. And I get 2 morning classes and 1 afternoon class. And then I get 2 morning classes in a row.
It's like
All right. What?
It's like they always argue this with like younger kids, but like you don't comprehend anything before 10 a.m. really. If you're
No, I believe that. So should we just all go back to bed for 2 hours and we'll reconvene at 10?
Yes.
No.
Yes.
I know everybody wants to do that. We got too much to get through, so unfortunately that's not going to happen. So at any rate, I did send you guys a couple of files. Hopefully you got them downloaded. Hopefully also everyone got the software installed. So we need the satellite software installed and activated, and also the Capture One software installed and activated. Did that work for everyone? There are no problems on that part? Good. Okay. Oh, I am recording this. Okay. Just so that you know, and I'm not entirely certain how this is going to work out, and I'm certainly not advocating for people stealing software or any of that kind of stuff. But historically, the way the licenses for Capture One have worked is you you have Capture One on your machine. You have you launch it. You put in the license code. You have to be connected to the internet. And what happens is that Capture One or Phase One looks at every computer in the world has what's called a Mac ID. It doesn't have anything to do with Macintosh. IBMs have a Mac ID. Printers have a Mac ID. Everybody has a Mac. Every piece of computer hardware out there has a Mac ID. Anyway, it registers that Mac ID with that serial number, and then that's it. And as long as you don't have to reinstall or anything like that, that software will work on that computer without being connected to the internet or without logging in again ever again. So then what happens is that when let's say that you buy an update or they do a new version of software and you purchase that update, what they do is they kill the serial number that you used to have. They give you a new serial number, and your new serial number will not only activate the new version of Capture One, it'll actually activate any version of Capture One. But for the people who don't bother to do that upgrade, whatever, at least in my experience, is that the license for because your computer was tagged as being able to run this certain software, and there's never a check that's put in again, whatever, it will run it indefinitely. So they have told me that the licenses that you guys have are going to expire on January 1st, and I'm telling you that would be out of the norm as far as I know. So just, again, I'm not trying to get anybody to do anything illegal or steal or do any of that kind of stuff. I just wanted you sort of aware of the situation and the possibilities and where that's at. But at least for the rest of the year, it's will certainly be available to you. Okay, so today's going to be about lighting. Part of it, we are going to talk about food, but I want to talk about lighting in general. How many guys of you are really comfortable with your lighting? If you, yeah, that kind of stuff. Some of you guys have been in other classes of mine before and have actually gone through what we're going to go through today. So if it seems like it's really repetitive to you and you want to take a quick nap, I understand. But what we're going to do is we're going to start out on sort of a more theoretical level and go over just a couple things. And then I'm going to move into the studio and we're actually going to look at some real lighting examples and sort of try to get things ready to go for next week. Next week and the week after are both shooting weeks during class. What I will probably do during class, just to try to keep things a little bit more lively and active, is whatever, depending on how much I can or cannot get to today. What I'll probably, I think the plan for next week will be to, I expect everybody to be ready to be shooting. We'll go ahead and start. We'll do it just like we did last time. We'll put it into breakout rooms. You guys will go out so that you've got somebody that you can bounce ideas off of, but that's sort of the plan. And then I might set up some just very quick demos so that I have time to actually get something set up. I will pull everybody back into the general room, spend 10 minutes showing you some other lighting trick or something else like that, whatever, and then let you jump back into your work. So I think it's just going to be a more efficient use of everyone's time. So that's kind of the plan. And then we'll go from there and see how it goes. Sound like a good idea? All right. So the first place I want to start is with the satellite software. So I sent you a file that's called Lighting 101. If you double click on that file, it will not open in satellite. You'll get a weird error message. It'll launch the satellite program, but you'll get an error message saying that it can't open the file. So the trick to doing it is to actually open the software first, and then we will open that file from it. Another thing that I've noticed on mine is that satellite expects you to be, well, I'll show you. So I'll hang on to this for a second. If you're interested, and I'll put it in the chat right now, um, I don't think we're really going to get to a place, I could be wrong about this, but I don't think we're going to get to a place where we actually spend an entire class or a couple of hours, whatever, going through the whole satellite software. But in one of my classes last semester, I actually did an entire demo of this software, explains everything about it, or most everything's about it. And that video is up on my YouTube channel. So I'm going to head there right now, and I'm going to copy the link to that, and I'm going to post it in the chat. So if in your spare time, you want to actually watch that whole thing to get a better explanation of what satellite actually is and how it works and what it does, then at least I don't feel like I will have abandoned you. Sorry, I should have clearly done this before. I can't find it right now, so I'll find it during the break and I'll post it during the break. Okay, so at any rate, I'm going to share my screen with you guys right now and tell you how to get it open. So once you do actually launch the software, hang on one second. Yeah, once you actually do launch the software, you should get a window that opens up. Yours is going to look slightly different than mine, but it'll look something like this. It will have a listing of recent files. If you don't see those recent files actually open, you can click on this browse button and actually then navigate to that Lighting 101 file that I asked you to open, and then simply double click on that file to go ahead and launch it, and it should bring you in to the satellite software. And your view may look different than mine, but I just need to know if anybody's having trouble actually getting this thing open. So Angel, what's the problem?
Mine keeps loading a message saying that it can't do it.
Can't do what?
It says that it can't open the file, even after I.
So you actually have the software open, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Did you get to any sort of room or any sort of page? Did you get to that browse screen?
Yeah, but it just asks me to do a room. So like pick a large room.
I'm sorry, it asked you to what?
Pick a large room or a small room.
Okay, just go ahead and say pick any room. It doesn't matter.
Okay. And then I can open this off.
Then go up to the file menu and come down to open project and navigate to that file that I sent to you.
Oh, okay.
Did that work?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now you'll see in my case, in my screen right here, it's not that you guys would really know it unless you're familiar with the software. Satellite expects my, I'm working on a larger display. That's the screen that you guys are looking at. It actually expects you to be working in the native resolution of the monitor. I actually work at a different one on my monitor. I have my monitor show me things a little bit bigger. So, and as a consequence of that, I don't actually get to see the entire satellite software interface. It doesn't really rescale correctly. So for me, I actually have to go back and change this back to its native resolution. So the way I do it is up to the Apple menu, down to System Preferences to Displays. And then in this window, you'll see right here, I've cheated, but if you click on the default for display, you'll notice that it changes mine, my whole screen, everything gets a little bit smaller. It's a higher resolution, which is why things are smaller. It's showing me more detail. And then in this case, I actually get the entire software interface. So with that, let me just explain really quickly. Some of you guys know Satellite from when we were last together. Your screen may not look like mine, that's fine. When we were last together. Satellite software is, it's a 3D software, it's a lighting emulation software that was developed by a group in Germany. It's actually shockingly deep. It's relatively simple to learn the program itself, but what it does is just, it's absolutely amazing because it really does the mathematical calculations that emulate the way light works. To an extraordinary degree. So it's got a whole, not only does it have a whole range of modifiers and models and cards that you can use and all props that you can use. I mean, to actually create, you know, rough-in sets. But it's, the way it was initially thought of, or the way people thought of it, or the way the designers thought of it, was that they were going to create software that would allow you to do lighting tests before you actually got into a studio, a real studio. That you could create a studio environment in this that actually mimicked whatever studio you were going to be in, and then you could go in here and do all the lighting and then generate essentially a lighting diagram so that when you went to the studio, you simply had to set it up. That was sort of the whole idea behind it. And it, like I say, I've spent quite a bit of time with it. It does work shockingly well. Simple things like if you change the wall colors from a very dark color to a very light color, it will recalculate how all the light plays off of those walls and bounces around in the room and opens up your shadows, does all that stuff. So at any rate, it's pretty remarkable. It's pretty well done. So what I'd like everybody to do, hopefully your screen looks something like mine. And at the very bottom, you should see something that says timeline. Can everybody see that? If you look at my screen, I've got a little tab. There's a rather large window here. This actually represents the studio. There is a small window to the right-hand side. That actually represents what your camera sees. Now, for me, personally, these on mine, I've got, so has everybody got something that looks something like what I'm looking at right here?
Yeah.
In spite of what you're seeing, what you're seeing in your image actually might be a little bit different, but on the image of the camera, what the camera's actually showing me right now has got little squares on it. Those are focus points. We don't need those right now. Those are actually just distracting for me. So to get rid of those, if you look to the far right-hand side, there's a slider that goes up and down. And underneath that slider, there's a little square with a set of other little squares inside it. If you click on that, it will then hide those focus points and you'll be able to see the image better. To start in the beginning, which is where I would like to start, I need everybody to have the timeline is showing. You'll actually see down on the bottom of your screen, there's a series of tabs, and one says timeline, one says model, one says modeling light, one says speed light, permalight, helpers, and props. I need to make sure that you click on timeline. And when I clicked on timeline, it just collapsed. So I'm going to click on it again to get it to pop open. There's a string of images that are running right down here along the bottom. Those images have also been processed out, because what we look at in here in satellite stuff to keep the software functioning as fast as it can, they do low-res versions of this. However, I also sent you yesterday a Capture One session, and I need you to launch that session now because the full res versions of these files are sitting in that Capture One session. So to do that, again, you need to find the session. It was a zip file. I actually asked you guys to unload it. One second. Can you guys all find that file? Now, this might start to get really heavy on our video hardware overload here. So I'm not entirely sure this is going to work, but I'm hoping it's going to work. If it doesn't work, we can still just look at the low-res versions of the files that are in there. But the high-res versions of it are actually better because they're fully rendered. And what I really care about are the shadows in all of this. And that's really what's at stake here. So if you can get the low-res versions of them to show up, it'll actually be much, much, much better. So there should be, again, there should be, you should have a, let me get to it first and I'll show you guys. Hang on one second.
Hey, Verser, it's asking me if I want to upgrade the session.
You can upgrade the session, yes.
Should you?
Yeah, you can. The thing is that I am working in Capture One 12. You guys are working in Capture One 20, I guess, I think. And that's fine. It's just upgrading the processing engine. The images that you look at won't change at all.
Okay.
And you could always downgrade if you need to, for some reason, ever downgrade, just let me know. So for me, if you can see on my screen right now, to launch it, if you actually open up the folder, there is inside of this, there is a preference file folder, and then there's a capture folder, outputs, selects, and trash folder. The easiest way to launch it into Capture One is to simply double click on that preference file, and that will actually launch Capture One, and it will bring this program into it as well.
Mine has an error saying could not read session data.
Okie dokie then. Of course it did. Can you start Capture One then?
Let me try.
Just start it.
Yeah, it'll let me do in like a new session.
That's exactly what I'm gonna have you do. So if you guys are unfamiliar with Capture One, that's okay. Just go ahead and start Capture One and tell me when you get there. Who else is having this issue? Anyone? Okay, so Angel, just start it. And just tell me when you get a blank screen up, and it'll either, you'll either have a blank screen like this, or it'll offer you to either create a session or to create a catalog, right? So go ahead and create session, click on create session. And you can name it whatever you want. Again, the naming convention that I use is the naming, it doesn't matter, but well, it does matter. The naming convention that I use, again, is based on the date. So the one I would create, if it was me, would be labeled or named 20201008. Again, that's today's date. Underscore CCC. Again, that's a client code that I would use, Columbia College Chicago. Underscore. And then the sort of some keyword about what we're doing. So just do lighting or light. And then click OK. And it should show you a place where to put your session. Where are you going to save this thing? Here, I'll do one so you can see it on my screen. So I've got a new session going up, and I'll just call it OK, and it's going to say under location where to put this. For me, or for you guys, in all likelihood, you should put it in your pictures folder. Do not put it on your desktop. Put it in your pictures folder. So simply click on the little three dots right there to open up and say, where do you want to save this? Grab your pictures folder and say OK, and then simply click OK to that to create that session. Here, I'll actually do this weird one right here that I just named right here, so I know that they're different, and I'll show you how to fix it. Okay, so that'll be fine right there. So did it allow you to create a session? Did that work? Do you have a blank screen that's got that session name sitting up at the very top? Angel, did that work for you too? No? What's going on?
It says new session. Please specify a valid name for the new session. But I already typed it in.
But you already did? What did you put in?
2020-10-08 CCC or underscore CCC underscore light.
And then when you picked a place for it, right?
It's in pictures.
Okay, and then did you click OK?
It says
And
I don't think you can put dashes in there. I just do like I do the entire date without the dashes.
okay, try the date without the dashes. There are illegal characters that exist.
Okay, yeah, it did it with no dashes.
Okay, fine. So then go to your, we need to go find that session that you just created. So go to your Finder. And in my case, mine is going to be in my TOS folder, not in my Pictures folder. But I've got both of them right here. So if you take a look, this was the original folder that I had that I sent to you guys. And then this is the new session that I simply created. So we need to see these in two different windows. So I'm going to create a new window. Command N in the Finder does a new window, just so I have a place that I can copy and paste to. Okay, so again, I'm going to find, so this is my new folder here. You need to find your new session, the one that you just built. And you need to click on the folder itself to open it up. Then you need to click on the capture folder. It should be empty. Are we good on this? Then go find the folder that I sent you, the capture that I sent you. Click on that folder. Click on its capture folder, and there should be a series of files in there. There's several JPEGs and a couple of PNGs. You need to select all of those and drag them into the capture folder of the one that you just built and let go. Did that work? Are we good on that? See, no, did you copy them over? Angel, Kaylee?
I think it worked. I'm working with I'm doing dual monitor, so like
Okay.
I'm trying to find it.
It's just a question of if you've copied the files over yet or not. That's all
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Yeah.
And Angel, did you copy yours over too? Okay, then when you go back to Capture One, they won't show up right away. When you go back to Capture One, you need to click on Capture Folder and they should show up. Did that work?
Yeah.
Are you good, Angel? Okay, so if you're in Capture One, scroll up to the very top. There's a series of thumbnails on the left hand, on the right hand side. There is a scroll bar right next to that. I need you to scroll up to the very top one, up at the very top. And you should see, it's a picture of again, it's a 3D model of a girl that's actually completely edge lit. Does everybody have this guy? Okay, so then I'm gonna go back to my satellite software and I need you guys to do the same thing. When you get back to the satellite software and you look at the timeline, there's a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's maybe more images on here. I need you to click on the one that's all the way to the left. Again, it's the very same setup that is of that image that we were looking at in Capture One. And in the timeline, you'll notice down at the bottom, I've just clicked on that thumbnail, you'll notice that there's a highlight, a yellow highlight that goes around it. And to the lower left-hand corner, there's a little box with an arrow pointing up. I need you to click on that, and that will actually load what the studio looked like when I made this image. Did this work for everyone? Okay, better question. Did this not work for anyone? Okay. Now I'm going to navigate around here. I'm going to show you guys how to navigate as well. You're welcome to play with this as much as you want. It's probably a good idea to refer back to my screen a couple of times because I can get there pretty easy to show you what it is that I'm actually talking about. So at any rate, there are a couple of controls, just so you know. Again, I'm not going to get into any great depth about this program, but it's these controls. Right now, what we're looking at is the big view that you've got is what you see in the studio. This is not the lighting that's happening in this image. This is like being in a photo studio with lights set up and modeling lights turned on, but none of this is, again, this is not what the view looks like when you actually take a picture. What you take a picture, what it looks like is actually the small frame to the right. That is actually your camera view, and that is the processed view. That is taking into account the strobe lighting that's actually happening in the situation. So these two are different. What you see in the studio is, or the bigger view is what you would see if you were just standing in the studio. What you're seeing in that small thumbnail to the right is your first capture, and it corresponds exactly to, this is a low-res version of the high-res version that you can now see in Capture One. This is actually the processed out version of it. So you can see there's a lot of similarity to it, but if we get in, once we get into the real shadow content of this, you'll see the shadows in Capture One are actually rendered a little bit more completely as opposed to the ones that are in the satellite stuff. This is a little less rendered out as far as that part goes. So anyway, just to give you some orientation in that. If you want to move around the scene, again, I'm doing this with a mouse. You can do this with a trackpad. There's a series of icons on the in the big view window, in the big view of the studio view. There's a series of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 icons that are sitting over on the lower right-hand corner of that view. If you click on the top one and hold your mouse down or hold your trackpad down and then start to push in some direction, you can push to the right and to the left, and it'll take you around in space, in the studio space. So you can sort of get some idea of what's going on and what's really in that space. You will see that there is a red camera in position of that space as well. You can also go underneath the floor. So in this case right here, I've actually gone underneath the floor and I'm looking up through it here. So that's actually one way to navigate around. The next icon that's right under that, the one that's got the 4 arrows that are moving up and down, left and right, if you click on that, it simply takes you left and right and up and down. It's a very different movement than the 3D space one. If you have a scroll wheel on your computer or on your mouse, whatever, you can actually scroll in and out of your image, and you can sort of move around in that way to just reorient yourself in space. So what I want to show to you guys right now and talk to you about is this. So if you can come to my screen for just 1 second. So what we need to do today is talk about contrast. And this is the first thing that we're going to talk about in terms of lighting. And so people, I think, feel like they know or instinctively understand what contrast is, but people struggle with how to actually create contrast and deal with contrast. And so before we can really talk about contrast, we need to talk about what really controls contrast. And what controls contrast is something that we call wrap. And so if we take a look at this image right now, so what this is a picture of is this model, and don't judge me for me putting her in some, wife beater top and shorts. What I needed to do was get as much skin in this so that you can actually see the wrap. If I put this girl in some black velvet evening dress, whatever, you wouldn't see what is really happening to her arms and that kind of stuff. So anyway, that's my disclaimer, and then I'll leave it at that. So what you can see, again, if you take a look at my screen, if you come here, that what's basically happening is this. What is causing this wrap? And so when I talk about wrap, what wrap is all this edge lighting that is happening around here. So you can see it on her face, you can see it on her arms, you can see it on the sides of her boobs, on the sides of her body. That is called wrap. And what that is coming from, again, if you look at my screen, is this light source is large. It's a very large light source. So if you think about the light that's actually coming out of this thing, that is actually hitting this girl, there is light that's coming directly out of this. And that light that's coming directly out of this, you don't actually see. That's what's causing the shadow in the front of this. She's actually blocking that light. But that's not the only light that's hitting her. If you think about this light that's off to the side here, so if you again look at my screen on the left-hand side right here, it's actually coming, light that comes out of here. If you think about light and the way light actually comes out, light moves in all directions. It does not go in a straight line like a car going down the road. It spreads out in every single direction. So even though there is light coming from this edge, coming straight out, there's also light coming from this edge straight to the side of her face, just like there is on this side over here. So that is what is causing all of this wrap. The wrap on the side of her face right here is actually coming from this edge of this softbox, and it's hitting her face over here because this is an extremely large softbox. Does that make sense to everyone? What wrap really is? Okay. So we need to go to the next version of this right now. To get to the next version, again, in your timeline down at the bottom, we're going to activate the second of them from the left. It's a girl more silhouetted. And if you then again click on the little box with the arrow on the lower left-hand side of that, it will load this thing and show you what the set looks like. I have now actually changed this set. So I'm going to zoom back out of my set and show you what I've actually done. So in this set here, actually come at my screen really quickly. I need everybody to sort of take a look at what's going on my screen. I'll show you what just happened. I went from this, where that light was extremely close to her, and I pushed the light all the way back against the wall. And you can actually see now what has happened. You'll also notice that the light, so let me ask everybody this. Just a question. So just put your mic on for just a second. Is that light larger or smaller than it was previously? Is this light bigger than this
No.
light?
No.
No.
No. Is it bigger or smaller relative to the girl?
Smaller.
Can you explain how that works?
Because you moved it back. So you were saying a while ago that like the contrast is controlled by how close the subject is to the light.
It's not how close it is. It's actually got to do with the size of the light. So look at what's happening right now. If I go back, so again, look at my screen really quickly. If I go back to this situation right here, you can see I've actually got light that's coming in from the side causing that wrap, correct? But when I move it back like this, you also notice, look at this frame right here. The frame of the girl right here is completely, the background is completely surrounded by white. But when I push this thing all the way back to the back of the room, you'll now notice that you can actually you can start to see part of the softbox right now. You can start to see some of those edges. And I no longer have light that's hitting the side of this girl's face. All of this stuff at best is catching right here. None of this is actually catching the side of her face. So the light itself, it's the same exact light, but because I pushed it back, it, relatively speaking, is a smaller light. Does that make sense to everyone? Who does that not make sense to? This is one of the hardest things to figure out and to determine in lighting. It's one of the most challenging things. So is this making sense to everyone? So we know this instinctively. If you think about it, the sun, you know, the sun, big sun in our sky, you know, the thing that rises up in the morning, gives us daylight and goes back out. That sun is millions of times bigger than the Earth. But we don't see it that way. We actually see this small little disk that goes up in the sky and goes down. And the reason it's so small to us is because it's so far away. If you think about stars, they're even, again, stars are just as big as our sun. Some of them are bigger, they're gigantic. But the reason we see little bitty pinpoints in the sky is because they're so distant, they're so far away. Does that make sense to everyone? So the thing that we need to think about here is twofold. So, and I need everyone to write this down. There are 3 rules to lighting. This is the first rule. The first rule is that size controls contrast. And we're looking at it right here. Now, when I push this light source back, my camera is still seeing that white. It's so the value that I'm seeing here, the measured value of this softbox hitting my frame does not change. It's white when it's up here next to her, and it's white when I push it all the way back. To prove that to you, and again, just to show you guys something, I'll wait till everybody gets something to write on. There is, one of the problems that I have with this program is there's no real easy way to actually do meter readings with this program. However, there is a built-in light meter, reflected meter reader that you can use that is in Apple software. I need everybody to go find this for me, please. To get to it, go to your Finder. Then go to your application folder. Scroll down to the bottom of your application folder to where you'll find utilities. Double click on the utilities folder to open it up. And inside that, there is a program called Digital Color Meter. If you double click on that and launch it, this will actually give you a small window. It looks like this, that will give you readouts. You need to use this drop-down display to actually say that you want to display values in Adobe RGB. And when you do that, you will get an RGB readout that's sitting right here. And anything that you hover over, it will give you the RGB readouts of those. So this works very much like we work with Capture One, and exactly the way we work with when we're trying to read those values off of a color checker. Now, I think we've done that in this class so far, right? We take pictures of a color checker, and to check our exposure, we say we want our white values on that color card to read between 245 and 250. We have gone over that in this class, right? Okay. Yeah, Kaylee's sitting there nodding her head saying, I've heard this in so many fucking classes. I have no idea if it's in this one or not, because that's what I'm thinking, right? Michaela's probably thinking the same thing. Jessica's thinking the same thing. Ellie's, all the guys who've been with me for a while now, they're like, yeah, I've heard this so many times. I have no idea where I heard it. Anyway, so that's where this thing is. So I'm going to park this thing actually right next to my window. So I just put it down on the lower right-hand corner of my screen. It should float on top of most things. If not, it will still read. So I'm going to actually take my big screen right now, and I'm going to make it just a little bit smaller so that I can see the RGB readouts in the corner of my screen. If you don't know what I'm looking or talking about, come to my screen, look at it really quickly. I've just moved my satellite slightly out of the way so that I can still get my RGB readouts. And you'll see them right here. And you can see that no matter what I hover over, whether it's interface here or the set here or the image part right here, it will actually give me RGB readouts. And so you can see that when I've pushed that light, well, I'm going to start here with the light completely forward to me. So it's right up next to the girl. And if I take a look and read my backgrounds right here, you can see that my RGB readouts are reading 252, 252, 253. I'm going to stay there close enough just because I don't want to hit this so hard that I start to flare my image. So it's very close to white. It's white by definition, 255, 255, 255. So I'm a razor hair edge away from that. If I push the light back, and because I'm still shooting it, now the light that's actually hitting her is falling off, but that's not the light I'm measuring. I'm actually measuring the light that I'm seeing because that softbox is actually in my frame. And if I push it back, I get the exact same readings here. None of that part has actually changed. However, I've lost the wrap. And the reason that I have lost the wrap is because, in effect now, this light, relatively speaking, is smaller. So there is no longer any light coming from the sides coming in on the girl. It's only now coming from the back. So I have nothing coming from the sides. I have eliminated my wrap. And this, as a consequence, is going to be a more contrasty image. Again, wrap is what is actually filling in the shadows. So when we think about contrast, we have highlights and shadows. Wrap actually comes around and fills in those shadows. It doesn't completely eliminate them, but it lifts them. And when it lifts them, we lose contrast. Again, contrast is the extremes between highlight and shadow. The more extreme that highlight and shadow is, the darker my shadows are relative to the same highlights, the more contrast I have. Does that make sense to everyone? Is anybody not clear about that part? Okay, we're gonna go to the next frame over, the third frame over. So again, I'm gonna simply highlight it first and then click on the little arrow to actually load it. And what you'll see right now, again, if you take a look at my screen, again, you can move around, but if you take a look at my screen, you'll get a better idea of sort of what's going on. So what I've got in this scenario right here is I've got that same big softbox extremely close to this girl, and she's right on a white background. And you can see, if you take a look at what's going on in the image that's in my camera here, you can see it's basically a side light, and you can also see that the shadows that are on the wall are sort of like moving. It's actually trying to calculate the shadows on the wall. So I'm going to show you, again, once you render these out and process them out, you can get a much better idea of what's going on. So again, I want you to go to Capture One, and we're going to go to the third frame down. So again, the first frame that we were looking at was the lighting that had that wrap. The second frame that we're looking at, again, you can see that we've lost that wrap because the light is now smaller, further away, and you don't have any light coming in from the sides because relatively speaking, this light now is much, much smaller. And so there is no light on the sides to come in. We've eliminated the wrap. If we actually go to the third one down, this is what that image looks like. And you can see the quality of the shadow that's actually on there. Now, there is contrast in this image. You can see that she's got a highlight on one side, she's got a shadow on the other side, but also I want you to take a look at the quality of that shadow. That shadow is not, it's not really sharp edge, it's not hard to find like that. It is, relatively speaking, somewhat soft. Now, I don't have any reflectors in here. I'm not opening any of this part up. That's just where this thing is at. Does that make sense to everybody what we got going on here? Okay, go back to the satellite software. And if you want to come look at my screen really quickly, I just want to show you what it is I did and how this actually happened, because this is going to have a big impact on you guys in terms of how you actually do your lighting part right here. So I have zoomed out of mine. I'm still doing a top-down view somewhat, so I haven't changed anything. So this is a relatively large light right here. Let me just square that part up. I am now going to go to my next frame over and just watch what happens. So come to my screen and then I'll let you do it on your own. I'm going to click on the next frame over and I'm going to load that scenario there. And what you can see in this scenario here, let me zoom out a little bit more, is that I've actually put a much smaller light way further away. So here, I'm going to show it to you in real time. I had that really big softbox there with nothing else in the studio. That's what I had going on here. But now what I have done is I have gotten rid of that softbox and I've added a 7-inch reflector, and it's really far away. Now again, I've balanced the exposures. So the exposure that I had going with the big softbox is the exact same exposure as I have going on here with the little small reflector light. Now, for those of you who are in my assisting class, we talk about this all the time. I may have mentioned it here in this class as well. When you think about trying to establish exposure using that white card or using the color checker card, again, we're always looking at the white patch of that card and we're saying, okay, we want those white values to be between 245 and 250. Because again, it's a real thing. We want something to have some texture in it. We don't want it to be 255. But there's also a trick in using that and saying another way to check exposure is that you need to look at the red channel of a highlight on Caucasian skin. And that red channel value should fall somewhere between 225 and 245. So again, if we look at my digital color meter tool right here, and I look at the highlight that's right here on this girl's skin, you can see that I'm getting a red channel readout of 230. That puts it exactly in the range that I want for what I would consider to be normal exposure. So that's basically what's going on in here. You can also see if we actually take a look up here at the background that she's on, the white background that she's on, I'm getting a 236, 236, 236, telling me that things are slightly down. If I actually base this on if I was going to treat that the same way I would treat the white patch of a card, which I could do, I would probably pop this exposure another third of a stop, or third, maybe even a half, to get it up into that 245, 250 range. Is everyone clear about what I'm talking about right now? I realize I'm going quick and there's a lot, I'm throwing a lot of numbers at you and I just need to make sure I'm not losing anyone. Are we good on this? Nods, thumbs ups, emoji thumbs up, anything? Are people still there? Okay, perfect, thanks guys. So at any rate, but I want you to then look at the difference also of the quality of the shadow that's actually on this image right now. So again, I'll show that you again, look at the screen right here. for what my camera looks like. So big source, really close. So it's not only big in its size, but it's even bigger because it's really close to her. If I then, and look at the quality of the shadow that's on the wall. If I then go to, again, a much smaller source that is much further away, I get a much sharper shadow. So if we again go to capture one, and you can see this is my large source that's in really close to her. In capture one, if you hold down your shift key or the command key, which is the key just to the left of the space bar, and click on the other image that's right underneath this, you can see the difference in these two. The one on the left-hand side is the large soft box that's in very close to her. Has far, far, far less contrast than the image that's actually on the right, which is that small light source that's really far away from her. So the rule, number one, that you should have written down is, would you guys agree that the image on the right is more contrasty than the one on the left? You can't ignore it. Look at the shadow. Look at the quality of it. Look at the shadow that's underneath her arm. This little shadow that's right underneath her arm here. Look how dark that is on the contrasty source. Look how soft it is actually on the other one that's sitting here to the side. Same exposure. The lights are lined up. I put them so that they are exactly in the same direction. So they're hitting her at exactly the same angle. They're exactly the same height. So all of those elements are exactly the same. The only difference is the size of the light source. That is the only thing in this that has changed. The direction, the exposure, everything else has been made identical. And you can see the difference in this. So I'm getting really sharp, crisp shadow here with that smaller light source pushed further away. So first takeaway is size controls contrast. The second rule, write this down as well. Size is controlled by physicality and distance. And so what I mean by physicality is I went from a softbox that was 4 or 5 feet in diameter to a 7-inch reflector. So just by changing the modifier, I changed the size of the light. But distance also controls relative size. The further I move that light away relative to my subject, the smaller it actually is. So those two things, the actual modifier size is one thing you can change to control size. You know, the actual 7-inch reflector is smaller than a 16-inch reflector. A 7-inch reflector is much smaller than a 6-foot octabank. Does that make sense to everyone? But then size also controls that. So I've got a question for you guys. Is a 7-inch reflector always going to be smaller than a 5-foot octabank in a photograph?
No.
How would that work? How do you make something that's 7 inches larger than something that's 5 feet?
Distance, you move it back.
Exactly correct. And that is the next thing we're going to look at. So go back to your satellite software, and we're going to go to the next image over, and it's the one of the, I've now gone horizontal, and it's 2 circles. So again, actually make it active and then click on the little box with the arrow. And if you take a look at my top-down view, what I've actually got going here is, and I'll show you these guys in order. I've got my camera is still facing, the big soft box is still at the very back of my set. So let me come down here a little bit and let me zoom in a little bit. Try and get this as big as I can get it. So what I've got right now is my camera, the red camera is actually looking at the back wall, and it's looking at that giant softbox that's in the back. That giant softbox that's in the back, again, it's almost 5 feet in diameter. Then I've got a head sitting right up here in the front that's actually got a 7-inch reflector on it. But take a look at what's going on in my screen. My screen right here is actually, or what my camera is actually seeing is these two things, relatively speaking. If you didn't know this was going on in this set, if you look at these two things, you say they're the same size. And photographically speaking, they are the same size. The contrast that I'm going to get from this guy back here and this one right here are identical, because for at least in this setup, they are the same size. Is everybody good on that? Does everybody believe me when I say that? Are we good on this part? Okay.
Yeah.
To see it in real time, and I'll show you what happens here, just so that you guys understand exactly what's really going on here. I'm going to take this 7-inch reflector and I'm going to push it all the way back here so that it's sitting right next to this guy, so you can actually see that I'm not lying to you. Watch what happens to this as I start to push it away. So I'm going to click on it and I'm just going to take it back. And you can see as I continue to go further and further back, it gets smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller. And that's what it really looks like if you had the two of those sitting right next to one another. That makes sense to most people. They're like, oh yeah, that 7-inch reflector is much, much smaller than the 5-foot umbrella. But if you bring it forward like this, then again, in this scenario right here, you can see they apparently are the same size. So we all good on this whole size and distance thing? Okay, so there's one last thing that we need to actually look at, and it is the inverse square law. Oh, if I ask, say what?
What was the third rule?
We're not there yet. We're getting it. It's what I'm going to explain right now. So hang on one second. There is a PDF that you guys have on all of this. You really need to look through all of the resources for System 5. There's a lot of good stuff in there. There's stuff about this. There's stuff about controlling contrast. There's stuff about styling tips and tricks. We're going to get to that today to talk about those things. So anyway, please do me a favor. Make sure that you look through the resources for that part. So if so, everybody can see, take a look at my screen right now. You guys need to be looking at my screen, not at yours right now. There should be a really big image that is titled Inverse Square Law. Is everybody seeing this part right here? Okay. So how many of you guys have never heard of the inverse square law? All of you have heard. Oh, a couple of you haven't. Okay. For those of you who have heard it, can you explain to me what it is? Yeah, nobody can. So anyway, I'm going to explain it to you, and hopefully this part will actually make sense. So all of us know, for the most part, if you set a light and you shine it on something, the further away you get from the light, the less your exposure is. So for instance, if I had a strobe light right next to my face and I took a meter reading of that right here, I would get a certain meter reading. But then if I moved way back across the room and I did another meter reading back there, that meter reading would indicate a less exposure. Less light is actually hitting my light meter. Does that make sense to everyone? You sort of know that, right? If a light is too powerful, you're lighting a subject and the lighting is too strong, you just pull the light back off and it drops your exposure down. That makes sense to all of you, right? We good on that part? Okay, and this is why. If you take a look at what's going on right here, I'm going to say that this is a point source right here, this S thing right here, this blue circle right here. Imagine it like a globe of light. Imagine it actually like a point of light. So something is infinitesimally small, but light. And as it shines, light moves out in every direction. It moves in all the way around. It moves behind it, above it, below it, it's just like a glowing globe. Light just keeps coming out from that. Does that make sense, the image that I'm trying to paint for you guys? Okay, fine. We're not going to look at all of it. We're just going to look at a small slice of it. And so what that small slice would be is this thing right here that's actually called R. Don't get too nervous about the numbers. And you can see that right here at R, what is actually happening, there's also an A that's right in the middle of this, that the space that I have right in here occupies a certain amount of light that has come out of this, that's come out of our point source here. One of the things that you need to know about light is energy. Energy never dies. Energy never goes down. Energy never dissipates. Energy never goes away. Energy can be transformed. So for instance, when you turn on an electric light, what ends up happening is that you've got electrical energy that's transformed into heat. But that heat, again, then dissipates out into the atmosphere, but it never goes away. The energy is never destroyed. The energy that existed in the universe when the universe was born is all still here. We don't have any more of it. We don't have any less of it. It simply changes its forms. That's all it does, but it remains constant. And that's what's happening here. As the light is actually leaving here, the energy that is in this space right here is never changes. It's the same amount of energy that existed way down here in the beginning. However, what does happen is as light continues to leave that, it continues to spread. It continues to cover a greater distance. So you can see what's happening here. If we call this A right here, all the light that is contained in this one rectangle is spread out over a much larger area right here. It's no less energy. The energy that is in this larger area right here is identical to the stuff that is right here. However, it's covering a much larger space right here than it was back here. So if you take a look at this A right here, this represents the same area that this original thing was right here. Does this make sense to everyone? Who have I lost? We good on this part? And the process continues as, again, we continue to go further out into space. It's only continuing to spread further out. So the same amount of energy that existed in this one square right here is now spread out over these 9 squares right here. Again, this 1A right here represents the area that it was originally right here. So you can see, although this big space right here has exactly the same energy, if we take an area that is identical to what we started here, it is only 1/9 of this space. Does that make sense to everyone? So the reason they call this the inverse square law is how this is actually calculated. So what they are saying right here is they're going to call this R. We're going to give R some real figures here in just a second. So R is basically this distance from that we've actually come out here. When we double the distance right here, so basically this distance right here is 2R. What they're saying is to calculate the way the light works is you take this 2 and you actually, I'm going to do it here on a screen because I want to leave this thing up so you guys can see this. So you guys can still see my screen as well, right? Me and my screen. We got on this? Okay, so I went to 2R, double the distance. That's all you need to think about. 2, and I'm just going to put a big 2 right there. What the inverse square law tells you is you put a 1 over the top of that distance, and then you square these things. So it just means multiply it by itself. So if we square them, it equals 1 times 1 is what?
1.
1. 2 times 2 is what?
4.
At double the distance, I end up with 1/4 of the light. And you can see that right here in this drawing. When you doubled the distance, when R got doubled, we now, instead of having that single A, we have now got 4 of those panels of A. And the light that would be represented here, if I was just shooting this one small area, is 1/4 of the light is actually hitting this, as was this original thing that was getting hit with all of it. Does that make sense to everyone? Any questions about that? Okay, we're going to take it out to one more. At 3 times the distance, it's again still being squared. So I've got 3 times the distance. I'm going to put a 1 over it. I'm going to square them both. 1 over 3 times 3 is 9. And that's exactly what's happening right here. If you take a look at this diagram, at the distance that we reach out here, it's exactly the same thing. I've actually got 9 of these squares now. The area that occupies that same amount of area here in the beginning is only being hit by 1/9 of the light. So let's put real numbers to this. Let's forget that these are R. Let's say that this right here, this first R, is 1 foot. And let's say that this is 2 feet. When you go from 1 foot to 2 feet, you, again, inverse square law tells you, you've only got 1/4 of the light hitting that. What is 1/4 of the light in f-stops? What is an f-stop? What is the difference in the amount of light from F8 and F5.6? Nobody knows?
1 stop.
How much light difference? If I go, let me rephrase this. I'm going to try and simplify this. If I go from F8 to F5.6, am I adding light or subtracting light from my exposure?
Adding light.
Adding light.
You've doubled the light.
I've doubled the light, correct? If I go from F8 to F11, am I adding light or subtracting light?
Subtracting.
How much?
You've halved it.
Exactly. The relationship between f-stops is always doubling and halving, doubling and halving, doubling and halving. Just depends on whether you're adding more light or taking light away. So if I go from 5/6 to 8, I'm letting in 1 stop less light. It means I've cut my light in half. If I go then from 11 to 16, wait, did I just say I started at 8? Here, we'll do it here again on my screen. So here, I'm gonna do my scales here really quick. So let's just do this together, everyone together. So I need you to count off f-stops for me. I'm gonna start at I'll be nice to you. I'm gonna start at 2.8. How many of you could read me every single f-stop to, let's say, F45? How many couldn't? Be honest. That has to change. This is your language. If you don't know f-stops, you are not a photographer. You've got to know them. You've got to speak this language. It's the way everybody thinks. If you go on set, this is the way everybody will talk about it. Nobody's going to look at you and say, hey, could you take that from F5.6 to F10? They're just going to say, can you knock 2 stops off that, whatever. It is our language. So again, of all the things I don't ask you to remember much, but I'm going to ask you to remember this. So if I start at F2.8 and I want to go down 1 stop, what is that next f-stop?
4.
And the next one?
5, 6,
And the next?
8,
Everybody, please.
11,
16,
Great.
22,
32.
32,
45.
45,
35,
Great. Can you keep going, just out of curiosity?
54.
Yep.
54,
90. 128. 180. 256.
Yeah.
And on
Yeah,
model.
you're right. Yeah, and after that 360, but yeah, they get to be really, really small. That's pinhole camera range. Okay, and let's say again, what we're going to talk about here is I'm going to say this is going to be down here at f45. I'm going to say I've got 1 photon of light. I'm just going to say we'll just make it 1 of something, right? It's 1 unit of light. So I'm just going to call it a 1 photon. If I open up to f32, how many photons of light do I have? What's the difference in 45 and 32? It's 1 stop difference.
You
Is
would
that
have
a doubling or a halving? It's a doubling, isn't it? So what's 2 doubled? I mean, I'm sorry, what's 1 doubled?
2.
2. If I go now to f22, am I adding light or subtracting light?
Adding.
And how much am I doing?
to be 4 photons.
I'm,
4 photons.
am I doubling or halving?
Doubling.
Doubling. What is 2 doubled?
4.
4.
What would you guess would be 16 then? How many photons?
8.
Is that making sense to everyone? Okay, so when I ask you what is 1/4 of a light, how many f-stops is that? What is 1 f-stop less? Half my light. What is 2 f-stops less?
Quarter.
1/4 of my light. So in this illustration, when I went from here at this, from R to 2R, I doubled the distance. I end up with 1/4 of the light. That means I lost 2 f-stops in that 1 foot move. Does that make sense to everyone? In the 2 foot move, now I've actually down to 1/9 in here. Again, how many f-stops? 3. Are we good on this part? Okay. So with that in mind, the last thing that we need to get to about what does control light is fall off. And fall off is controlled by the inverse square law. So if we go back to our satellite software and take a look at this, what I've actually done now, and I want you to just click on the, again, it's instead of the 2 circle one, the single circle one, highlight that and click on it. And what you will actually see is I've now lined things up. All I did was move that 7-inch reflector over so that it was right in front of my camera in perfect alignment with the big light that's in the back. Does that make sense to everyone, what we've got going on here? We good on this? To see what that really looks like, I'm going to turn off the 7-inch reflector. I just turned it off, and now all you're seeing is the 5-foot octabank in the back. Turning it back on, you can see they are in perfect register with one another. I'll turn off the one in the back, and you can see nothing actually changes. They're in perfect alignment, and they are identical in relative size to this camera. Does that make sense to everyone? Is anyone unclear about this? Okay, and then finally, and watch my screen here before you guys actually do this. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to put a model where my camera is. So I'm going to stick the model exactly where the camera is, and then I'm going to move my camera around here to the back and take pictures of the model. I just want you to know that the light that is hitting this model is identical in size. What does that mean as far as contrast goes?
The same contrast.
Exactly. And can you explain why it's the same contrast?
Because like in the camera's eyes, it's the same size, like the wrap or whatever it's going to be.
Absolutely correct. That is exactly right. And if there's no other takeaway you get from today, that will change your life, because that is exactly the truth. There's just as much side wrap coming in from this small 7-inch reflector really close as there is from this really giant one all the way back. So the next frame over is going to be that move. I'm going to move this camera over here to the back and put a model right where this is so that the light on the model is the same contrast and the same exposure. Now, this big light that's way in the back is really far away, so I've got to crank its exposure up higher than I've got this one that's really close, but I've just balanced the two so that they actually are the same. So that's what's happening right here. So I am going to do that. You can click the next frame over, and again, the first one, back of the girl again, and then click on the arrow part right here. And we'll actually show you our scenario here, our setup right here. I'm gonna zoom back out a little bit. You'll also notice that I've made the floors black. I've also made the walls black, because the problem I get, and you can see it right here, this light that's actually here in the back is hitting the floor. That floor then becomes another light. Does that make sense to everyone? It's something you need to think about when we're doing all of the shooting, especially all of us who are shooting now in really small little spaces. Most of them have white walls. That light is bouncing all over that shit, whatever. And if you really want to control your light, you have to know that light is bouncing around on those white walls. So at any rate, let me zoom back out a little bit. So this is my scenario right here. I've got just that one light that's in the background. That's my big light. I've moved my camera around here. I got rid of the little 7-inch reflector that's right next to her. And then I added a white card here in the background so that you have something that you can actually look at. So again, the contrast that's on this girl is the contrast that's on this girl. However, what I'm getting here is I'm going to now change this to the last of the images, and we'll go look at these in just a second in Capture One. I'm going to change these to the last of the image by, again, simply clicking on this. And what you can see is actually happen. I've got my little 7-inch reflector right here. Again, the girl has not changed, the camera has not changed, and this white wall has not changed. But you can see that I have got a much darker wall that's actually here than I did here. And the reason I have that has to do with light fall off. It is the third law of how you actually deal with lighting in here and what we're talking about here. So, first law is size controls contrast. Second law is size is controlled by actuality and distance. And the third is distance controls fall off. And so what's happening here is the reason the exposure on these two people is the same. I'm going to take a look at them together here in our grouping here in satellite stuff, just so that you can see them side by side. The exposure on the girl is the same. The contrast on the girl is actually the same. What's different though is the fall off. What's happening here is, this is my first image here that is the light source that's way in the back of the room, and I'm getting very little fall off. The light that's right here that is now very close to her, I'm getting a rapid fall off. And it all has to do with the inverse square law. So we're going to see if we can actually figure this part out. So I'm going to go back to my first image, to this one right here. I'm going to change the floors on this so that you guys can actually see this a little bit. And I just need somebody to write these numbers down for me. So I just want to show, I'm going to make the floor white so you can see what I'm actually trying to do. 1 second. Or I'll make the floor gray. Okay, so I'm going to measure, so this is my first scenario right here, and I'm going to actually measure the distance from this light to the girl, and then I'm going to measure the distance from this light to the background. So that's how I'm going to start. So with my measurement right here, I'm going to go from this to the girl, and I need somebody to write this down. I'm going to call it, it says it's 19.97 feet. Just write down 20 feet. I got to keep the math simple here. So it's close enough. It's within 3/100ths of a foot. So the distance from big light to girl is 20 feet. if I then also go big light to the board that's in the back, and I'm going to just put this sort of into the middle of the board in the back and let go, that is 26 feet. Again, I'm rounding these down just to make the math. It'll be very close. It's 26.22, so I'm a couple of inches off, but you guys are going to give me the benefit of the doubt on that one, right? Okay, great. Thank you. Appreciate that. Then I'm going to do the same thing for the other lighting scenario. So I'm going to go to the other lighting scenario. And again, I'm going to make the floor gray so that we can see what's really going on. And in this case, I'm going to go from this light. So I'm going to measure this light to the girl. And we're going to call it 3 feet. And then I'm going to do the same thing all the way back to the back one. And that one I get 9.5 feet. Okay, so I've now got a ratio. I'm going to actually do this on, I'm going to stop sharing my screen really quickly and show you how I would do the math on this to really figure out what's going on here. Make sense? We good on this? Okay, so let me get out of this part really quick. Do you guys see my whiteboard?
Yeah.
All right, great. Okay, so in our first scenario here, this was the big scenario here, so I'll just put a B. So the distance that I wrote down here was 20 over 26. And again, we square these things. So 20 times 20 is 40. And 26 times 26 equals 600.
20 squared is 400.
Sorry, I thought I said 400. I just didn't write it in. 476. And if we knock this down, divided by 2 equals 200 over, I'm just trying to get it down to the smallest fraction I can get it. 200 over 338, which is 100 over 169. And I'm just going to kill both of those. It is 1 over 1.69. That's what my ratio is right here. This is almost a 1-to-1, which is actually telling me that my light fall off on this is almost negligible. Does that make sense to everyone? Remember, if my light fall off was 1 over 2, that would be 1 stop. I'm nowhere close to that. So this is about a half a stop here. So we would just say in here that, yeah, roughly the light fall off here is about a half a stop. Does that make sense to everyone? Who did I lose and when did I lose you?
I think you might have lost me. Wait, can you just say the steps one more time?
Sure. Let's actually just go through it again one more time. So hang on one sec. Did you guys watch the debate last night?
No, but I saw there was a fly on Mike Pence's head.
That was really all I was going to mention. That thing I just did reminded me of the fly that was on his head, but at any rate. Okay, so these are my measurements. From that light source to the girl was 20 feet. The light source to the background was 26 feet. If we do the inverse square law, again, we square these things. So 20 times 20 equals 400. And 20 times 26, I'm sorry, 26 times 26, these are squared, equals 676. So again, you know, I maybe this will help simplify the math a little bit better here. I am just going to, I don't want to round this down. So anyway, I'm just trying to reduce this down to the smallest fraction that I can get. I don't want to keep it up here at this 400 over 676 because nobody understands what that means, right? So I basically, let's try that. I'll just round it down so that you guys get some sense of what's going on here. If we round this down to make this actually a 600, which isn't quite right, but nonetheless, it's close enough. Basically, I can kill these, and I've got 4 over 6. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
If I divide this, again, I want to continue to reduce this. Basically, 4 over 6 is equal to 2/3, or 2 over 3. That 2/3 is actually equal to 1 over 1.5. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, so again, if I had 1 over 2, if that was what resulted, that would mean that I had a one-stop fall off of light. Again, this is a halving and doubling. A half would equal one stop less light. One stop fall off. So again, if that was a white background, it would not be white because it would be a one stop down from white, which would make it a light gray. However, I don't even have that. I've got, this is 1.5. This is not 2 here. So it's even less than that. So I've got roughly about, we're estimating here, you're getting close, about a half a stop fall off. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you.
Did that help? Okay, let's do the other calculations here now. The little light that was much closer. So in the little light that's closer, I actually had 3 feet from the light to the girl over 9.5 feet to the background. And again, we square these. 3 times 3 is 9. And then over 9.5 squared. Here, I'm going to do this. We're also going to cheat just to make this a little bit simpler. I'm going to just get rid of that half. Let's just call it 3 over 9. So basically, 3 squared is 9. 9 squared over here is 81. And again, if I reduce this to its lowest denominator, 9 into 81 is 3. So this is actually 1 over 3. 1 over 3. Does that make sense to everyone? Hello?
Wait, so if you're dividing that by 9, isn't 81 9 then?
What's 9 times 9?
81.
81.
Right, so if I divide 9 by 9, I get 1. If I divide 9 again by 81 to keep these the same, I get 3. Oh, sorry. You're absolutely right. 1 over 9. Thank God, because that 1 over 3 was really fucking me up, if you want to know the truth. Does this make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Including my mistake? My God, that's the first one I've made this year. Well, actually, maybe the first one I've made this. We're only in the 2000s, right? The last mistake I made, I think, goes back to 2005, and I'm not really sure what it was, but no, I'm just kidding you guys. Okay, so 1 over 9. So in this case right here now, I've got 1/9 of the light that is actually hitting this. That is a 3-stop fall off. Again, 1 stop fall off would be a half, 2 stops would be a quarter, 3 stops would be an eighth, so it's about 3 1/3 stops over, 3 1/3 stop fall off. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
So you can see in this scenario with the light really far away, I only get a 1/2 stop of fall off. But with my light really close here, I get 3 1/3 stops fall off. And that explains exactly our last two things. So go to capture one right now, and we'll look at it. And this is the difference here. Look at the very last two things right here. I've got, this is the one with the big light. This is the one with the small light right next to it. The only difference in these two is the fall off, because that first big light was so far away, I get a very small fall off right here. Because this light is so close, I get a very rapid fall off, and that's what's ultimately ended up happening here. If you want to take a look in the satellite stuff, I'm still sharing my screen with you guys, right?
It's the whiteboard.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Let me get rid of that. And go back to my screen. So again, the difference in these two is, again, if you guys are actually looking at I'll go into capture one right here. Look at the difference in these two. The girl is the same exposure, but the background is actually considerably darker. This is the one where the light is really close to the girl. This is the one where the light is really, really far away from the girl. And it has to do with fall off. The further that light is away from the girl, the ratio between those two is so much less than it is here. So again, to look at it in the satellite software, what's happening here is I've got that small light, and again, it hits her, and I get a really quick fall off to here because this thing is so close. The ratio between the distance to the girl and the distance to the background is much greater than when I go to this one. Where the light is much further back, and the distance from here to here is much closer than the distance to here, that ratio. Is this making sense to you guys now?
Yeah.
So why would this actually matter? What's going on here? Why would anyone bother to deal with this? So let's say I've got a scenario where I've got a group of people. Well, here, I can actually try to do this as well. Let me see if this works. I'll put him on the other side. No, I don't want to put him in the shadow. All right, I got a person in the background that's on a shadow. Let me turn him around. And I'm going to do the same thing to the other person on my other screen right here. You guys see a problem? Identical light on our subject. Is that identical light on the second person that I just added? Not at all. This one, the person that's behind here is a half a stop down according to our calculations. This person here is 3 1/3 stops down according to our calculations. The light on the person is identical. So the reason this matters, fall off matters dramatically depending on your lighting. If you think about sunlight, it's the way everybody tries to light things. When you go into the studio or you use a strobe light setup, would you end up with the same light as the sun? Don't you end up with fall off? You end up with this problem right here, the shit that's really close to your strobe lights. If it's perfectly exposed, as you start to get further away, it actually gets much darker. If you want to balance that out so that you have a more even light across a broader range, you've got to get your lights further away. But what does that mean when you push your lights further away? What happens to your light? It gets smaller. What happens when your light gets smaller?
It'll make more contrast.
Exactly. That brings this whole thing full circle. Is this making sense? Are we good on this part? Who has questions about this? Guys, if you can master these 3 things, all your problems with lighting will go away.
Wait, so if the light's farther away, there will be less fallout, but then if it's smaller, there will be more contrast?
Exactly, exactly. So people always wonder how Annie Leibovitz does her really, you know, where she's got like 15 people in a row, this giant group. Everybody wonders about that. I'll show you the last thing, and then we're going to actually start, we're going to move into the studio and start to look at some stuff. So let me just show you one last thing using the whiteboard. So what Annie does, I actually used to share assistants with her, so I actually know this all to be true. Sorry, hang on.
Do we need Cetolite anymore? Because my computer keeps freezing.
No, you do not. You can actually get rid of that part. And I should probably do the same thing.
Do we still need capture one?
You do not, no, you took a look at, again, those same 2 last images in Capture One. So just to make sure everybody's square about that, let's just go look at that really fast, just so it'll be part of the recording as well. This is the difference. This again, big light way far away, identical in size to this. The size of these lights is exactly the same because this, even though it's a 7-inch reflector, is moved way closer to her. So the contrast on them, on the girl, is the same. The exposure on the girl is the same. But the fall off is completely different. The fall off on this small light, because it is so close, is very rapid. The fall off on this one, because the light is so far away, is very gradual. So the only difference in these 2 is fall off. Are we good about that part? All right, so I'm gonna do this with you. I'm gonna, yeah, I'm not gonna run Capture One out of this one. And I'm gonna quit the satellite software. And I'm going to discard all those changes. And then finally, I'm going to go to the whiteboard and show you how Annie does it. And then we're going to take a break, guys. And I'm going to get the studio set up. It's pretty good. Oh, fuck, I keep doing this. Sorry. All right, so in Annie's scenario, what she does is, so let's say we have got people here. We've just got her really big group of people that are in that really long row, that kind of thing that she does. So that's it. Here's her camera right here. Here's Annie's head right here. So we're looking straight down on this image, and she wants to light this stuff. And most of you guys know that Annie does her stuff, for the most part, it tends to be somewhat Rembrandt-y side lighting right here. So what a lot of people would do is they would come and they would put in a big old softbox right here like this. And for these people right here, that lighting would be perfect. But for these people down here, the fall off between these is just way too extreme. So again, the light that would be coming and hitting these, if you've got a normal exposure here, these people would probably be a stop or two stops underexposed because they're so much further away from this light than these people are right here. Does this make sense to everyone, my little illustration here?
Yes.
Okay, great. So Annie decides that she is going to then try to make this work better. And she is going to then move that same light back here. So now she's got a light that's back here. We'll keep it on the same angle. Way back here. Hang on one second. Sorry, so Annie moves her light way back like that. So again, things are far more even here. The light from here to here, it's a little bit closer, but not anywhere close to what it was before. So this actually makes things work considerably better. However, when she moved this light back here, this light also got considerably more contrasty because relatively speaking, this now is a much smaller light. So to fix that, what she does is, get rid of this light. She builds a giant light back here. And she's good to go. Questions about this? Does this make sense to everyone? Did I lose everyone?
No, it makes sense.
We're
All right.
good.
Perfect. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing my screen really quick. Okay, guys, I've got, let's call it 10:15 right now. Let's just call it 10:15. If you guys could be back at 10:30, we've got so much to get through, but we're really gonna look at lighting in the studio. I'm gonna pause the recording. The room will stay open. It may get a little wonky. Okay, so now we're recording again. So I am metering at F16, 16.3, and I want to be at 11. What does that mean I do? What is the difference in 16 and 11?
One stop
One stop?
of less light.
Exactly. I need less light, so I need to turn down, but it's 16.3 is what I'm reading on my meter. So what's the difference in 11 and 16?
Stop.
It's one stop. I need to lose 1 1/3 stop. I am at 16 1/3. If I go down one stop, that puts me at 11 1/3. And if I go down that extra third, that gives me F11. Exactly. So that's what I'm going to do on my camera. I can actually control it here from the top. So I'm going to take it down. And try again. And you can see that I've actually brought in the detail part of the glass. I've got some sort of interesting stuff going on there. I'm looking at my metering around here. This is a white background, so I can see the metering on that is reading, and that's sort of like 240. I've got a 245 that's happening up in there somewhere. So I'm sort of in that range that I want to be. If I was going to use my gray card, because my color checker, and I do want to use my color checker because I would make a profile for this setting that we actually have going right here. So I'm going to set this. In place of my glass. Oh, and of course, my camera has locked up and that doesn't come in. And so this is where I'm at. If I can go back and I'll take a look at my color card. This is not really a good accurate reading for reading my white balance here because I'm not directly in the light. I'm not metering in the light. So to sort of go over again what that whole thing would mean is this. When I go to actually do a meter reading of this, I would never actually meter. You guys can see my meter, my studio setup, right? And still, I mean, I'm in tight enough to see this meter, correct?
I think the camera is blocking the meter. Yeah.
See that? Okay, great. So this is not how I would actually meter this light. Again, you need to meter the light itself. This is not metering the light. This would be metering the light. Is that correct? How many of you were taught that when you meter something that you put your incident meter at the subject and you point it at the camera lens and you do a meter reading? How many were taught that? It's wrong.
Yep.
You want to meter light, you're metering, you put the incident meter at your subject, but you have to point it at the light. So the same scenario exists when you're trying to do a color card. If I put it like this, if I orient the color card like this, it's the same as putting the meter and pointing it at the camera. Instead, I need to lay it flat like this and then reset my camera to meter the light that's actually coming down on this. So that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna take this out again. I'm gonna lay this flat so that I can meter this light. I've got to take my camera off and reset so that I'm coming down on it. That orientation is how you would use this card. And now, again, what's wrong with this picture? Come on, guys, I need engagement. I need you to be there. Most of you guys have been in my class. Is there any problem that you see with my exposure to that card?
Okay.
Sorry?
Somebody. There we go.
Sorry. Do we have everyone back?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
You were the one that got kicked off.
Yeah, well, there you go, right? Okay, so back to this. So for all of you that I was actually talking to, what's the problem with this card? Is there a problem?
You're
Now,
muted.
Go ahead.
Still muted.
To what? Anyway, the problem with this card, it looks like there's a little glare on the edge of this card. If there's glare on the card, that's also going to pervert the readings that I get here on this guy. So I'm going to just jack it up slightly to try to pull a little bit of that off and shoot again. That actually ended up being worse on there. So I'm just going to stick with my original version of this. I am gonna go, it's so weird. I keep trying to do it on the wrong computer. I'm gonna go up in this part right here and I'm going to, again, read the white balance numbers. So pick the white balance here. I'm gonna neutralize this image and read my values over here. And you can see I've got a 247 in my luminosity channel right there. So I know that this exposure is correct. That's telling me that this exposure right here is indeed correct. So we'll go back to that to see what it really looks like. So my meter was correct. I now actually have a color card that I can do a profile in if I want to. I can also white balance based on this. So I'm gonna put this back on. And there you go. So what do you guys think? Anyone?
Just in general or about the picture?
About the picture.
It looks nice.
That's exactly the problem. It looks nice, but it's like, yeah, okay, I've been there, done that. All right, so that's how a lot of people will actually start to shoot still lifes, and that is the temptation a lot of people get into. That's not to say that this is wrong for every single lighting scenario, but for me, this just lacks any sort of character, any sort of anything in there. I mean, it's okay. It's an interesting shape of the glass. The bourbon looks warm. So that part is actually going for me, but yeah, again, it doesn't do a whole lot for me. So then people say, well, okay, why don't we actually then do this as daylight? So hang on one second, because I've lost. I've got my capture one, but I don't have the studio. Are you guys able to see the studio?
Yeah.
Huh. Why can't I? Hang on just one second. Okay, is that better? No, it's better for me. So you guys can see both again, right?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay. So the next thing that people will usually do in this scenario is they'll say, well, let's try to create daylight. I mean, that's the way everybody thinks about doing it. So I'm going to turn this guy temporarily off. And so for daylight, if we were talking about north window daylight, can you guys describe the quality of that light to me?
Even?
Yeah, window light, north window light. Classic 101. Most north window light, when we think about it, certainly here in the Northern Hemisphere, is indirect light. There's no direct light. The sun does not come through a north window. The sun does not rise in the north and set in the south. The sun rises in the east, which is never north, and it travels through the south and then sets in the west. So north, what we call north window light, whatever, is always indirect, flat, essentially flat light. It's got some direction, and we will put direction in here. So some people will try to do this with modifiers, so you guys can actually see my setup right here. I do have a strobe that's right here. And what I'm gonna do is, I'm not gonna bother with any sort of modifier. I'm gonna use this white wall right here as my modifier. So I'm gonna turn this guy on. I'm gonna raise it up a little bit. So now this guy is just going to smack against this wall. If I want a tighter light source, if I want something that seems more spotted, more focused as it was, I would come in tight like this on this wall like this, a tighter spot on that wall. However, I want a big general version like it is really going to be, and like it would be with a north light. So I'm going to bring this all the way over here, and then I'm simply going to bounce it against this big white wall. Make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you. And we'll see what it looks like. So again, that's my B version right now. So I've got big light hitting that wall. You guys can see that part, right?
Yeah.
Yep.
And then this guy up here is turned off completely. So I'm just going to see what I get here again. So now I'm reading 5.6 at 400 on this. So I'm just going to change this. We'll worry about depth of field later. I just want to go through a quick set of scenarios here for the lighting, and we'll just sort of see what it looks like. So 5.6 on this guy. And in my opinion, this looks worse. So I think that the depth of field part here, though, is throwing me off, so I don't want to keep it that way. So I actually am going to change my, I want to get back to that F11. So how can I get back to F11? First off, I'm going to check the power that I've got on this guy. And the power on here I've got is down to 1/8. So if I want to get back to 11, and I'm at 5.6 right now, how much more light do I need to do that? Can we count this out together? So I'm trying to go, I'm at 5.6. I want to be at 11. Does that mean I need more light or less light?
Less light.
No, you need more light.
You're getting less light, but you need more light to combat it.
I am going to stop down from 5.6 to 11, which means my camera will let in less light. Therefore, to have the same exposure, because the exposure here is correct, I need to increase the power of my lights. Is that right?
Yeah.
Who doesn't get that? Again, I'm stopping down. I'm going to go from here, from 5.6. Well, let's just see. I'm going to go down to 11. I'm not going to change anything, and look what happens. Did that flash fire? Did you guys see that flash fire?
No.
There it did. So why is this image darker than that one?
Because you changed it by 2 stops.
Because I stopped down. I went down to F11 from 5.6. So I'm letting less light in. I'm trying to increase my depth of field, but I'm letting less light in. So I need to compensate for that. And then to compensate for that, I need to raise the power of my strobes. And I'm asking you how much I need to raise the power of my strobes. If I started at 5.6 and I went to 11, how many stops of the loss is that?
2.
Count it out one at a time. What's from 5.6 to what? On my way to 11, what's my first stop down?
8.
And the second stop down?
11.
11.
There's a 2-stop difference here, so I need to raise my lights 2 stops, which is what I'm going to do. So let me go back to here. This is where I'm at. I just added 2 stops of light to my flash. And now I'm back to the exposure that I want with slightly greater depth of field. How do you guys feel about this photograph?
Nice. Wait, I have a question. So when you stopped it down, did you lose, were you at 1/4 of the light that you had before?
So when I stopped down, it really doesn't matter what my strobe was set on. Usually we would think of these strobes in terms of watt seconds. So if we think about like in the studio, if I was say like at 400 watt seconds, I would have gone, again, to increase my power, I would have gone from 400 watt seconds to 800 watt seconds, doubling it. That gives me one stop. And then I got to double it again to get my second stop. 800 doubled would be 16. So I would go from 400 watt seconds to 1600 watt seconds, and that would be a 2-stop increase. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it was breaking up a little bit, but it does answer my question.
Okay, great. Okay, back to my question here, though. What do you guys think about this image? Oh, come on, you can be honest with me. It sucks. Let's just cut straight to the chase. So what a lot of people would say in this is that, okay, the image is flat. This is like just recording. There is no art. There's no really beauty in any of this stuff. There's not, this is just, I'm getting something on film and it's like, well, okay, sure, fine. What else can I do about this? One of the tricks that I would strongly suggest that you guys consider doing is this, and it's called shooting against the light. And it's something that I do all the time. It has I think personally, a number of advantages to it. So that's the way I'm going to go about doing it. Actually, before I get there, though, I'm going to try one other thing with you guys really quickly. So this would be north light right here. I want to actually simulate, though, direct sunlight. How would I do that? Can you describe direct sunlight to me? Is it soft?
No, it's harsh.
It's harsh, right? Is it contrasty?
Yeah.
It is contrasty, right? So it's, right now I've got a light hitting a big old wall. I've got this giant light source. If I wanted a light source coming from the very same direction, however, I wanted it to be more contrasty. I wanted it to have a harder edge to it. What do I need to do? What quality of light do I need to hit this thing with?
A bigger light.
What
A bigger
creates
light?
contrast?
Just turn around the reflector so it's pointing at the subject.
What would that do?
You would create like really harsh shadows
Why?
because there's no diffusion.
Oh wait, a smaller light.
What controls contrast? Rule number 1.
Size.
Size
Size.
controls contrast. So whoever said turn the light around was correct, because that would give me a 7-inch reflector instead of a 4-foot wall. However, is that the contrastiest that I can get in this scenario? What controls size?
You could also move it all the way
Distance.
back to make it smaller.
Exactly. Again, second rule. Size is controlled by the physicality of your light and its distance. So let's see if we can see any difference in that. I am going to spin this around right where it is. First off, I'm going to move this other guy out of the way just so I think you guys can see this a little better. Okay, I'm at F90 right now. Where would you guys go? Can you count that down? Again, I want to shoot at 11. How many stops different is that? Let's do it one at a time. I'll go from 90 to 64 is 1 stop, 45 is 2, 32 is 3, 22 is 4, 16 is 5, 11. 6 stops down is what I need to do. So I'm going to try to do that on my light. That's 1 stop, 2. Sorry, hang on. What does that say? Can you guys see it?
F11.
It says 11.2. I'm within 0.2 of where exactly I want it to be. This is what you need to be doing in professional studios. No dicking around. Okay. So now I've started to pick up a little bit of interest. You can see though, in part, if you look at this, does this look like it is lit by a strobe or does this look like it's lit by daylight? What's my problem? I am getting a reading right here. I'm getting a reading right here in the front here of, say, luminosity reading of about 193 right there. It indicates to me that this thing is still down a little bit. So I'm going to lift this up a little bit. I think my exposure is slightly under, even though my meter reading is actually giving me that. So I'm going to add 2/3 of a stop to this. Better. So I'm looking at my reading up in here, and I'm reading in the 220s. What's that telling you guys right now?
Underexposed.
Why do you say that?
Because it needs to be between 245 and 250.
Because of why? Why does this need to be in that range?
To show highlight detail.
And in large part because this thing is white and it's supposed to be white. Isn't that true?
Yeah.
Right? So you're absolutely right. If this thing was gray, that would not be the case, but this thing is white. So that definitely is the case. So again, that's exactly what I'm going to do here. So I'm going to raise it here. I think it's probably about another, I'm going to say 2/3 of a stop. And I'm going to hit it for, I'm at a 240 right now. I'm going to hit it one more third. Okay, so I'm in my 249 right here. Actually, it's hitting a little bit out of here, almost into 250, but basically I'm okay in here. So I'm reading a 250 in here, but what about here? What am I reading? What do you see?
You're reading 209.
Right. What is happening here? Why am I at 209 down here, which is way underexposed for what white should be? This is actually almost this is a quarter tone gray. In this part right here, I'm actually in a pure white, or the white that I want it to actually be in. What is happening here?
There's fall off.
There is fall off. That is exactly right. That is exactly what is happening here. And I want to get rid of that fall off. You'll also notice what's causing this shadow right here.
The fold of the paper or the.
Is it the reflector or
It
the?
is the reflector, exactly. So if I liked where I was at right here, but I didn't want that shadow in the back, I could actually simply remove the reflector. This will probably change my exposure as well because this reflector is concentrating some of that, but we'll see what happens. So now I've basically opened it all up. But again, my question to you guys all is does this look like daylight to you? I did lose a little bit down here. I lost probably about 1/3 of a stop. Just to make things quick, I'm just going to open it up 1/3 of a stop here. We'll see what that looks like. Now, let's do it without the tape on the bottom. Yeah, that seems a little bit, yep, that's 249, a little bit cleaner. But again, I've still got this whole issue right here. To me, this looks lit by a strobe. This does not look like daylight to me because I've got so much variation of tone that's happening around here. I do like the directness part of it. I think that that part's actually beginning to work for me. But the rest of it I'm struggling with here a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is move this thing away. and up. So again, can everybody, I can't see me, so hang on one second. All right, so I'm gonna pull this whole thing back, but I wanna keep the same angle. So as I come back, I also need to come up to keep the same angle on this. So I'm gonna come back and raise this up, and I'm gonna take everything I possibly can here. I'm gonna get back as far as I possibly can and bring this guy up. Do a quick metering on that. Even if my meter doesn't give it to me exactly the way I want it, at least it'll give me some place I can get sort of close. I'm rating 5, 6 1/3. So basically to get to 11 again, I'm gonna go back to my 11 here. I need to increase it by how much? I'm at 5, 6 1/3. One stop, more power would give me 8 1/3. 2/3 of a stop would give me 11. So I'm gonna come up 1 2/3 stops. My buffer is locked up. You guys were the class that I was clearing the buffer with all the time, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So a more even overall light, but again, clearly I'm still way underexposed, but look at the difference that I've got going on here. I'm at a 191 there, I'm at a 75 up here. It's nowhere near the problem of that fall off that I actually had. So again, I'm just gonna wildly guess and say that this is, I'm just gonna do this with ISOs instead. I'm gonna go up to 2 stops more. $246 here, 241 in the background. So for me, this is beginning to look more like light would actually happen. But let me ask you guys this. So I need everybody to come on the screen really quickly. What time of day is this? Anyone?
Noon.
Noon. So if it was noon, where would the sun be?
Right
Directly
overhead.
above it.
Right overhead. Does that explain these shadows?
No.
Not at all. Look at, you guys even have the benefit of looking where the fuck I am actually in the studio. Where's that light?
To the west.
We'll call it the west, or it could be the east, depending on your point of view, but but you're absolutely right. So if it was noon, the sun would be here. As it starts to set in the west, it starts to come down like this, whatever. It keeps coming down, it keeps coming down, it keeps coming down. And eventually, if it goes below the horizon, that's past sunset. So where is this guy in that relationship? What time of day?
Golden hour.
Exactly. Is this image color balanced to golden hour?
Nope.
Nope, not even close, right? So to fix that, I am going to go to color. And in my color, actually, I'm going to go back to my camera right here and should be able to pick it up here. White balance. So I'm going to take my white balance control right here. Same thing that you guys use when you're in either Lightroom or Camera Raw. When you go into it, that first setting. If we start pushing this in this direction, we actually start to warm the entire thing up. So you can see everything is getting glowier. Even look at the color of hopefully this is reading for you guys as well, is that the color that's actually happening back here on this, here, it's picked up this warmth. Does that make sort of sense what we have, what's going on here? Can you guys see the difference?
Yeah.
Does this seem to feel now more like real daylight, available light? It's the color is now matching the time of day. I've got a really direct, hard quality to this light. Is this beginning to make sense to everyone?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is this a better image than that?
Yeah.
Or that? Hello?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, yeah. Again, I maybe pushed that a little too hard on that, so I'm going to pull this back a little bit. Yeah, that feels a little bit better to me. Okay, so again, when we're talking about the quality of light and you're thinking about contrast, you're thinking about all of those things, this is where stuff begins to come in and play and make a difference. So the next thing I'm going to show you guys and talk about, again, I personally like the quality of this light. It actually fits for me. But for me, one of the things that comes up all the time, and it's one of the things that I try to get people to do, this is a pretty serious side light that I've got going right now. But what I try to encourage people to do, especially when they first start shooting anything, it's shooting still lifes like this, it's shooting fashion, that part doesn't really matter. But it's thinking in your mind about shooting against the light. That's the way most people phrase it. Some people will just say, well, backlighting, that's basically what you're thinking about, you're talking about. And that's what we're going to talk about here. And that's what I'm going to try next here in my composition for this, is to talk about or to think about shooting against the light. So for me, the next one that I'm going to try is I'm going to bring this thing around the back. By the way, I really like what I've got going on right now, and I just want to try something else out. I would mark the front light stand. The back light stands, I know pretty much where they are. They're against this wall. That's not really how you would mark a stand, but for a really quick move, it works. And while I'm back here, actually, I'll just do it off of here. Like where that part's at, I'm going to push this back just a little bit, twist it just a touch more. Four. All right, I'm thinking this is a little bit hot. I'm going to go ahead and color balance again. I'm going to reset back to neutral. However, I take that back. I said that's too hot, but I'm just looking at a bad thing on the screen. So that part is actually working for me pretty well right here. It's a little bit on the hot side. So I'm going to stop down a third. Try again. Yeah, it seems a little bit better to me. What is wrong with my setup? Can you guys see? Let me show you this, my scenario here. So this is my setup right here. You can see the light and you can see the camera, correct?
Yeah.
What's the problem? Number one thing people don't ever think about, number one thing people should think about.
Why is there a reflector in the umbrella?
Oh, that part doesn't matter. That's not what I'm really talking about because that thing's not even on. What I'm really talking about is my issue right here. I have got a light. I'm actually shooting against the light, exactly what I talked about doing, right? That light is pointing at this camera. What is the problem with this setup?
Flare?
You betcha. That's exactly the problem with this. That light is hitting the front of this lens. Not acceptable. So there's options that I have. The first one is I could actually use a lens shade, which most people ignore, but at any rate, that's what I would do. Lens shade on here. What else could I do?
Put a gobo up off of like the left side of the camera.
I'm sorry, do what?
Put like a gobo up.
That's
to
exactly
block
what I
it.
can do, and that's exactly what I'm gonna do. So I'm gonna get rid of this guy. And I'm gonna simply put this up. And I don't really know where it is relative to my camera. I mean, if I come into my shot, I don't have a modeling light on this, so I can't really tell. But I know for certain I can spot across from my lens to that guy that has not got anything in it. Let me reframe first. And look at the difference. So this was the image before. Look at the quality of the glass. Look at how ghosted this is. That whole edge is being lost. Contrast is being lost in here because this thing is being flared. Look at the quality of the liquid. Look at how sharp it looks over here and how clean all of this looks. Flare, one of your biggest enemies of all. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. I want to show you something else while we are here in Capture One, and this is actually part of your assignment, so we might as well talk about it right now. In your assignment, one of your assignments is to actually shoot to a predetermined layout. I've given you both of those layouts. They are actually in the folder that you downloaded today that has the JPEGs in it, the processed versions of the satellite software. It's actually in there. So I'll show you where they are and what they're named. They're also on our website. So if you lose these, you can simply download them for our website. But if we take a look at what I sent you.
All we see is Capture One.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. All right, you see my Finder now?
Yeah.
Great. Okay, so here in TOS, set this, let me hide that. Oh shoot, it's actually not on this screen. It's on my other computer. Hang on one second, I'll show it to you on my other computer. So inside the, again, the satellite, the output from the satellite stuff that was in the C1 Pro folder, in the capture folder, you'll actually see there are, don't do this to me. There are these two tear sheets right down here. One of them is called tear sheet layout with black type. The other is a tear sheet out with white type. So I'm actually going to apply the tear sheet. So basically what it is that imagine yourself being given a job to shoot a cover for a magazine. Well, the image that you make is great, but there are a lot of considerations that you need to take into account. So for instance, where does the title of the magazine fall? Where is all the copy about what's inside the magazine? Where does that fall? Where's the price scanner bar on that cover? Where does that fall? all of those things need to become a part of your composition. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So we are now getting away from having to shoot just to make pretty pictures. Now we've actually got to shoot, and we've got to consider what and how is this going to look at on screen in an image that actually has got this type on it. So these are the two. One of them has white type on it. One of them has got black type on it. I'm going to do it with the image that I'm working at right now. Would you use white type on this or black type?
Black type.
Black type.
Why?
Because
You have
every
white background.
Exactly. We're going to shoot white type. Well, we got white type. We'll put it on a white background. Okay, that'll be fine. Nobody will be able to see it. Probably will make your image look better. But at any rate, so I'm going to do that, and I'm going to show you guys how to do that. So anyway, those are the two images that you need and the two that you're actually going to use on this. So let me go back to sharing this screen. Aren't you guys impressed, at least mildly, that I've got half of this to sort of work occasionally and possibly at some point, almost?
Yes.
Thank you. You know, I'm very happy if you choose to lie to me. I have no problem with that at all. Okay. So to figure this out where we are, so this is the image where I'm at right now. I'm fairly certain is 107, and actually this is where I'm at right here, is this guy right here. Is that more backlit version of this? That can't be. Hang on one sec. Yeah, I know this is where I'm supposed to be right here. Okay, so this is where my image is right here. Again, it's got that warmer color. I like that part to it. I enjoy what's going on in here. I like what that part is actually happening here. I like that part of it as well. So this is all beginning to work for me. So again, what I'm gonna do now is in Capture One, and you guys need to open up your Capture One, and you need to tell me, it depends on what you've got, the way you've got yours set up, but I'm gonna make this easy for you and just show you how to add it. If you open your Capture One, do you guys have it already open?
Give me 1 second.
Okay. And you can load, the fact that the other stuff is loading is fine. That part doesn't really matter to me. I just want to show you where overlay is and how to add it.
Okay.
So everybody, does anybody not have Capture One open yet? Okay. If you look at along the icons along the top, you want to pick the one that looks like a camera. It's the second one from the left that's up at the very top. If you need reference, just take a look at my screen. I'm pointing at it right now. Click on camera, and when you look down, do you see overlay at the anywhere at the bottom of this screen? Do you see the word overlay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Click on that to open it up. So once you get this thing opened up, you should still be able to see all of those capture files that are that were the output from the satellite software. Is that true?
Yeah.
If you scroll down to the very bottom of that, do you see two things? They are holiday covers for, I think it's Food and Wine.
Yeah.
Great. You can actually drag and drop those onto this little square right here. So for instance, if you grab one of those things and simply drag it over into the little square inside of Holiday, it will load it. If you don't have it available to you like it is right now, if you need to go looking for it, it's this file menu right here. If the word right underneath the overlay where it says file, you can click and get a drop down menu, and you would simply come back down to choose file, and then you go out and you navigate to find wherever you put this thing, and you actually load it. You just pick it and say okay to that, and it will load. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does everyone have something that looks like holiday written here inside that little overlay box?
Yeah.
Great. You need to click on the show underneath this to actually get this thing to show up. And once you do click on show, you can actually see here that it does show up. And then we can actually, say what? Hello? Have I lost you guys?
No.
Okay. Just want to make sure I hear. Anyway, so this is the holiday cover thing that we're actually going to talk about here. Now, there are some controls for this. So for instance, when you're first starting to try to figure out your layout part here, it's actually got type on a transparent layer. So you can crank the opacity all the way up, and this will actually show you what that cover looks like in its entirety. If you drag the opacity all the way down, you eliminate it. It's not gone, you just have reduced the opacity. A lot of people will work with it somewhere in the middle just so they can sort of see what's actually going on in this. You can scale this thing. You can actually start to make it bigger or smaller. So again, depending on your image and how you're working with it, you can change the scale of it. I'm going to leave mine pretty much exactly where it is right now. You can move this thing horizontally using sliders or vertically using the sliders, but the easier way to move it is to simply click on the hand, and then the hand will allow you to actually move the thing around so that you can orient it the way you want it to be. Now you can see in my case, I've got a problem, or at least what I think is a problem right here. I don't necessarily feel like this is in the proper place that it actually should be. I think that this should actually come down in my frame a little bit and possibly out here over into this side a little bit more. So I am going to leave this showing, and I'm going to reframe my image and see what I ultimately can get out of this. And that now becomes a better mix for me. I'm letting the type breathe around this a little bit. I'm feeling better about that. Is this making sense to you guys, what's going on here? Yeah. And I love the fact that the little, that all the type here is actually being framed by all the cast shadow that's coming out here. Those are the things that really begin to appeal to me. If I needed to move that so that it was not, let's say I wanted to change where this whole thing was. Well, you know, if I move my light a little further around the back, well, here, I'll just show you. I'm going to move it around a little further around the back to bring that area a little bit more coming towards the front of my camera. And now you can see that I've actually shifted. So now it's actually, because the art director said, oh, that plus really needs to be on a white background, not hidden like this. So it really draws your eye down to it. And this is how you need to go with it, blah, 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 blah. Is this making sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. One last thing I want to show you really quickly. Just I'm back.
Oh.
Okay. Do you guys have everything back? Are you guys good?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry about that. Don't close the screen again. Okay. When you use overlay like this is actually non-printing. This will not print out in your image at all. So if this is the one image, let's say that you wanted to go ahead and print, because one, I'm going to ask you to do, not only am I going to ask you to show me your final images without the overlay on it. So I'm going to hide this really quickly. And let me just get out real quick. So I want to see your final image like this, but I also want to see it with this. The problem is that this is non-printing. This is a non-printing character. So in order to get this to print, and again, if you have trouble with this when it comes time to actually when it comes time to output your image, because you're not going to be printing this, but when it comes time to develop it so that you can show this to the class, when it comes time to do that, again, you can't get this to be output in your file. When you process your file out of Capture One, and if anybody has a problem with this, I can get together with you. We can go over this, or we can get together as a group and just look. But this is basically how to do it. You need to actually click on the print that you're actually going to do on this. And let's say that this is the image that I want to print right here. I'm going to turn off the overlay on my camera really quickly, just so that nobody gets confused about this. In the printing part right here, under watermark here, you can watermark this image, and the watermark that you use on this image can be that that image that I just gave you guys. So again, if I come down and I say I want to watermark this image, and I'm going to say I want to do it with an image, and then I am going to go find that image. It's asking me to drop it there. So let me see where this is in here. It's going to be in pictures. Hang on, I got to find out where this thing is.
Didn't you say it was on your other computer?
It is, but it's got to be on this one too, or I wouldn't have it right here. So I'm just going to see if I can find it. Tier shape layer. Let's see if I'm hoping it'll give me where this thing is located. And it is. It's in session 5. Okay, so this is how you would do it. Here, drag this over. It's going to be in Verser, Columbia, commercial, session 5, and it's the PNGs. If you see a TIFF, it doesn't work really well with TIFF on this guy. So at any rate, this is the file, and I do want it with black type. So I'm just going to drag that here. And then again, the very same controls that you had before, you have here to control this. So we would want the opacity to be cranked all the way up. I'm going to grab the little hand to move it into place. I'm going to make it much larger. Sorry, this is also very, very apparently time intensive. So anyway, you guys get where this is going. And then you would simply print this out and it'll print. That'll be a watermark on it that'll actually print out. Does that make sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do we have to do 2 images, one with the black print, one with the white print?
No, the only reason I give you the options is that I want you to be able to use whatever background that you want to use for the work that you're doing. So it doesn't make a bit of difference.
Okay.
They're the exact same thing. It's just with the type inverted. Okay, so hang on one second. Let me get my list of stuff.
Are you going to want us to use the magazine crop for this?
Am I going to want you to do what?
The magazine crop for these?
Yeah, for just this one image. Okay, you only need to do one of these. That's it. But yes, for this, I want it to look like the real deal. Make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. Couple of other things that I want to get through. Lighting. I'm going to stick with lighting today primarily and try and get through as much of that. So if any of you want to get a jump start on your shooting for next week, you're more than welcome to actually get that part. So I just want to make sure that we understand a number of other things here. So of stuff that's on my list. All right, I'm going to go back to my initial setup. actually, yeah. Okay. Turn this guy on. Back to my 11 at a 400 ISO. We'll see how well this works. I'm going to temporarily turn that part off. Also going to turn off my watermarking. Back to 400 ISO, back to 11, and see what this looks like. I'm going to color balance again. Now in this case, I'm not going to worry about exposure. I'm going to base exposure on the subject content. However, I can still use this color card to give me white balance, which I am going to do. So again, I'm not going to use this to deal with exposure. I'm just using it to deal with the white balance issue on this, because I'm not entirely certain if the paper itself is indeed neutral or if the bowl is indeed neutral either. But this way, I don't need to worry about it. All right. So the challenge that we've got here is shooting white on white. That's going to be the thing that we're actually running with right here. So I'm over here on my image. I am not going to reset white balance. I'm going to simply hover over this. You'll see that at times I don't get a readout here. If you trade your image and then come back into this one, sometimes it'll kick in. But right now, I'm not getting my readout, and I'm not going to get my readout here no matter what I try to do in this. I will try to reset white balance and see if it'll give me any sort of reading here. And actually, I'm picking it up now. So I'll go ahead and accept this as a white balance. And it probably makes sense because I want it to be neutral anyway. I'm reading a 246 here, but this is not what I'm really looking for here. I want this to be white on white. That's what I'm really going for here. So I am going to bump up my exposure because that 245, that's what I want to be true, something that has detail. But if I'm going for page white, this needs to be 255, which is where I'm going to take this. So again, I'll go back to my camera. In this case, I'm going to bump it up 2/3 of a stop just using ISO, and we'll see what that does. So I'm at a 253, 254. I can't really take it a whole lot more than that. So what is, let me reframe this just a little bit so we're looking at something that's got a little bit more. Okay, so what's the problem with this setup? Do you guys get at all nervous about the separation between this bowl and the background?
Mm-hmm.
To what?
Yeah.
Yeah, that becomes a serious problem here. I'm going to actually add 1/3 of a stop to this and see if I can't really get that background in pure white. We'll see what happens. Ah, that's not going to work. Yeah, that's the problem right there. Please don't tell me my internet is unstable. So you guys can still see the Capture One screen, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this becomes the problem. How would you fix this? When you're talking about shooting white on white, what a lot of people's temptation would be to do in this would be to simply stop down. And they would say, okay, let's just take this down to F16. I'm just stopping it down, a full stop, just so that you can see. Do you perceive this as white on white?
No, the bowl's a little
No.
gray.
This is now gray on gray. And if we get it stopped down even more, it only gets worse. So I'm gonna go to here and try one more. Did I just lose you guys on something?
We
Yeah.
lost.
Capture One anymore.
You lost Capture One, that's what it looked like. So let me see if I can get it back. May lose you on that first one right now. Let's see. Are we back?
Yeah.
Perfect. So this is where I'm at right now. And clearly, if you take a look at this, that's not white on white. Mentally, you might be able to say whatever, but you look at this and it's really what it is. It's gray on gray. There's no question about that. So I'm going to go back to what was a true white on white. Here, it was my 800 ISO at F11. Ambient light check. And again, that becomes my real problem here. I've got a clean white background right now. What I'm seeing up in here, let me get rid of this really quick. So I am getting my clean white background up here, but it's just the bowl is actually gone here. So to fix that, we need to kill some of the light that's actually on the bowl. Hang on one second, because I've also lost you here. All right, so back to my setup here. So this is what I'm gonna do. What the trick to doing white on white is that if the background is white, you will perceive that the object itself is also white. If you make them both gray, they will both be gray. And if you do the flip side, if you make the object white and the background a light gray or a medium gray, whatever, it will never be perceived as white on white. So the only way to actually do things white on white is to keep your backgrounds white and then to actually knock down the exposure slightly on the bowl. So to do that, I'm going to add a small robo for this. So this is the one I've got. I've got actually metal ones, but you can actually cut pieces of poster board. You can cut pieces of foam core. You can use, there's a million things in the world that you can use to actually knock this light off, but I'm going to use this guy because I have it. I'm going to take an arm and bring it out. I'm going to stick this into it. I'm going to tighten that up. And typically what I will do is I will actually drop this down right on top of this thing so that I can get it oriented correctly. And then if I leave it down like this, the more I leave it down, the more extreme this will actually happen. You'll see it in my image, but that's okay. I just want you to understand what's going on here. And you'll see it really throws a serious shadow on that part. Too strong, but as you start to lift this away, it will actually then make the effect much more subtle, much less extreme. So I'm actually going to back this considerably off and try again. And so now I'm actually bringing that back in. I'm pulling that tone back in. So if we take a look and compare it here to my beginning, this is where I was in the beginning. This is how I've actually now pulled that back down a little bit. I'm still getting my clean white background, but I've got much more detail that's actually happening in here. Now, if you feel like that there is a little too much gray that's in here because I've knocked out that exposure part, we can actually add a fill card in the front to pull some of that back in. So fill card. And I'm simply going to bring this in to the point that I just see it happening in my lens. So and so now I've lifted up the front of that guy just a little bit right here. So these are my 3 images. Let me get rid of just that one. So I started here, obviously no separation, went to here, got good solid separation from here, but maybe a little dark on the front here. And this now is actually giving me good separation, and I'm opening up that front just a little bit. Is this making sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Okay. White on white. We'll get to black on black next week. That'll be one of the brief ones that I actually do with you guys. Sorry about that. What is that?
Onion skin?
It is an onion skin. If somebody asked you to do a compelling picture of an onion, would that suffice?
No.
Why not?
I don't know.
If it was to, okay, I'm going to illustrate a story about onions. This wouldn't work for you?
No.
I kind of think it does, but that's just me. To check on my exposure to see if this part is correct, I'm going to look at this. Yeah, I'm feeling like that part's down a little bit. That part's a little okay. The shadow that's being kicked across the back is actually coming from the edge of the seamless that I actually put up there. However, I kind of like that part because what I want to talk to you guys about right now is what we would call unusual modifiers. And then we're going to look at a couple of other things and call it a day. Thanks for hanging in for the long haul. Anyway, I just wanted to point out that sometimes things that are not necessarily the most obvious are in many ways a more compelling way to make an image, but nonetheless, we'll go with an onion, a real one. By the way, canned air is your best friend. Before you shoot pictures, you can see, I don't know if you get, well, you can't see from that camera up there, but there's little onion bits all over that. So again, this is going to be my shooting against the light sort of scenario here. So I've got the onion part here. I think, oh, shit. That the shadow on this is a little bit too strong. So I'm going to add a reflector on the other side. For me to do reflectors, I just put an A-clamp on a card like this so that I can just set it on this side like that. And that's all I really need. So that sort of like opens it up. It gives me a little bit of sheen on the back part of it. But when I look at this, it's like, okay, but that's like really boring to me. I don't find this like compelling or unusual at all. So what we need to think about or talk about here is what I call strange modifiers or unusual modifiers. And I'll show you what some of them look like. Glass vase. Another glass vase here. You don't need to use glass. I've done this. If you go to, no, they don't have any buffets anymore, but you know, you used to be able to go to a buffet at like Jewel or whatever and get salad, and they had those big plastic containers, the clear ones. You can get those. Those make actually great modifiers. But what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to put this in the path of the light that's hitting that and see what we get. I'm going to keep it outside of my frame so that I don't see it. And see what happens. So now all of a sudden I've got some play of the light that's beginning to happen in my image, and look at the difference in these two right here. And you can see this second one right here, there's all sorts of strange things that are actually happening. A lot of times these things are easier to see if you actually do have a modeling light on. So if I really wanted to, you know, if I felt like I needed to seriously pre-visualize this, I would simply attach a flashlight to my flash so that it would shine on this guy so that I would actually be able to see what's going on. And to see that, so flashlight in there, and you can sort of start to spot and see kind of what's actually happening on there. And do I need to move this? And like, yeah, I really do need to move it. I want something to hit more highlight on there. I'm gonna put this where this guy is. It feels like that's a little bit more interesting. We'll see what happens. Ambient light check. Boom, lacka. Is this making sense to you guys, what's going on here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what do you think? Would you rather be doing, which of those would you rather do? I'm not really looking for an answer to that. I'm just trying to get you to think about how this can actually work and make the sort of things that you guys are doing more compelling. I'm just trying to throw in as many of the tricks as I can possibly throw in. Is this making sense to everyone?
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Hang on one second. Are there any
I have a
questions about
question.
this stuff so far?
Yeah, I have a question. Why do you do the ambient light checks?
It's actually an excuse. How many times have you been in the studio and you didn't turn your radio on, or you didn't you didn't have the radio connected to your camera, or you forgot to turn the power pack on, or you do any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And you take a picture and your screen comes out black usually, and people look at you like you don't know what you're doing. And I always give them the excuse. It's like, oh, that's an ambient light check.
Okay.
It's a, believe me,
That's
every
good.
student that I've ever had uses it, and from now on, you probably will too. So anytime anything screws up, the wrong strobe or what, it doesn't matter. It's just, it's always an ambient light check. And there's like, oh, okay, they really know what they're doing. Okay, we did talk about, I think last time, about being able to get into these things using it's not a tele extender, it's just an extension tube to actually get in really close. Did we have that conversation yet?
Yeah.
And did I show you guys those tubes, and did we actually see a picture of one that actually was taken using one?
Yes.
Yes? Okay, well then I'm not gonna go down that road again. We've already done that part. Oh, raking light, okay. It'll be the last thing that we'll probably get to for this. So in terms of unusual modifiers, anything will do it. Glass will do it. You can, so for instance, if I needed this whole thing, let's say it wasn't tall enough, you can actually do things like turn stuff upside down and then stack stuff on top of it. You can do all sorts of things to actually build enough. Again, you need a good quality hard light. You can't do this with a really soft light. Those things won't come out. So again, another reason to actually use again, these harder lights. So I'm stealing this straight out of that book, Light and Magic, that you guys have been hopefully reading. If not, I can't beg you enough to read that. Sponge. Sponge that has a little bit of texture to it. What is texture, really? When we think about texture, what do we really see? What do we think about when we do it?
Variety of contrast across the surface.
Variety of contrast. Is that what really gives you texture?
Depth.
Depth? What do you mean by depth? Can you explain that a little more?
Like how you can see the pores in the sponge. Like there's dimension to it.
And what brings out dimension? What is dimension?
Highlights and shadows.
It is indeed. Oh, you fucker. What kind of light do I have on here? You can see it. Relatively soft. It's a large light source, right? And it's relatively flat on. The direction of my light is relatively flat on. Wouldn't you agree? Sure you would. Okay. I'm going to turn that one off. We're going to add a different light to this. I'm going to take this up a full stop and try that again. Which of these two has more texture?
The second one,
Why?
because you can see more of the highlights and shadows.
And why? How did I achieve that?
By putting the light in a position where it rakes across the surface.
Exactly right, and that's exactly the right term. This is called raking the light. And so what we're doing here is we've actually, we are putting a light to the side, which really will bring out, hang on one second. It really brings out the highlight. Oh, don't tell me. Did I lose you guys?
No.
Now we're here.
So this is the one that's actually on the top. It's a relatively flat light. That was the one coming down from the ceiling, but this is now coming from the side. And what it's doing is that anything that it actually, that's on the light side, it is actually able to hit, it lights up. Anything that's deep into those little valleys actually drop into shadow. And because I'm amplifying the highlight and the shadow part of this, this ultimately has considerably more texture than this. So texture is not always necessarily a great thing. For instance, if you were doing a beauty shot, let's temporarily jump out of that for a second. If you were doing a beauty shot, would you prefer your skin to start out looking like this or starting out looking like this?
The top one for sure.
Definitely the top one for sure, right? And that's still a shitload of retouching right there, but that would be where, yeah, absolutely. So it's just something to actually keep in mind and think about this. Does anybody have any trouble with the shadow that's on the bottom of this, just visually?
It's a weird shape.
It is a weird shape, right? It's got this little weird thing right here, and then it's got this sort of like weird bump right here, and then it just drops off here. How would you fix that?
Like without diffusing it?
Yeah, because I want to keep the texture. If I diffuse this and kiss the texture goodbye.
Maybe just like move it up a little bit.
Move it, the whole thing up this way, you mean?
Yeah.
Well, let's take a look.
Oh, I think I meant move the light, like move the light forward a bit. So the shadow kind of went off the. So it's all like one cohesive thing. I'm not sure.
Oh, that's good. No, so for me, what I'm going to do, and again, this is hard to do without modeling lights, but what I'm simply going to do is twist this. And so what I did by twisting it is I've clearly opened up this part right here. So that part actually looks nice to me. I still don't like the shape of this, but there's going to be no way to actually get rid of that. So how would you guys keep the sort of like the quality of this image right here, but without this ugly shadow background part right here? How would you deal with that?
Would you add a second light?
I would not. Then I'll get conflicting shadows, and the thing that I've worked so hard to get would actually be defeated. Again, if I cross light this, if I put a light coming across the other side, then everything that the first light put into shadow will actually be put into highlight, and vice versa.
But, I mean, maybe you can put like something under that, like to raise the object, but then I don't know if it's gonna create another shadow underneath.
Actually, you know, that's a really interesting call. Let's find out, because that would be an option to do. So let's see what, yeah. Nothing like a couple of extra pocket wizards. Nope, still too big. Shit. Extension tube and light meter case. Oh, and weird glass shape from the other side. So it doesn't really fix it for me. For me, personally, I would just do it in post, but that's me. But you guys get where it's, again, this is just the kind of thinking that I need you to start thinking about and starting to do. Make sense?
Yep.
Are there any questions about this so far? Are we good? All right, hang on one second. We've got one last thing to look at. I'm going to go back into my other place. Almost there, hang on. All right, can you guys hear me? Can you guys hear me? Yes?
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Okay. Woo. Much better. Okay, I need everybody, if you can, you can quick capture one, you can jump out of that, you can get rid of those video resources. I would like to just take a fast look at our website. There's a couple things left on there that I want to talk about really quickly before we call it a day. And if you can, go to our session 5 resources. So in our session 5 resources, there was some conversation there again. Some people looked far enough ahead to actually spot that one of the things in the assignment is to do an anti-still life. I want to talk about what those are really fast. There's 2 sets of slideshows in here that you can actually read, watch through. They're not that long, they're not that big. Again, this is all Irving Penn's work, but this is what I'm basically talking about when I say anti-still life. So many people think their image or their impression of doing still lifes is that things have to be this really sort of pristine, beautiful, you know, totally tricked out, everybody's smiling, everybody's happy, all that sort of notion of advertising. And the truth of the matter is that you can do really compelling work that doesn't necessarily fall along those lines. And I want you guys to challenge yourself to think in that way. So again, some people would say, well, this is just grotesque. And I don't necessarily see this as grotesque as much as I see this was actually one of Irving Penn's first covers.
You're
This
not
actually-
sharing your screen.
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Hang on 1 second. All right. Do you see my Irving Penn still life slideshow?
Yeah.
All right. So anyway, what I was saying, this was actually a cover that ran for Vogue, if you can believe it. This was one of Irving Penn's first covers for them back in the 30s. And you can see, even though it is sort of made up of these somewhat, what people wouldn't necessarily say are the most beautiful, pristine, whatever kind of things, compositionally speaking, this is still just this amazingly stunning, compelling image. Again, stuff like this, there's some real inherent beauty, I think, in this. So that is part of the challenge for you guys. It's only one of your 4 images, and it doesn't necessarily need to be pushed maybe as far as some of these are, but the fact that you consider something instead of trying to just make it about, oh, this would be how the advertising industry would actually go after this, or what would appeal to them, not necessarily in that direction. What kind of light is this right now that we're looking at?
Direct?
Direct. Can you talk to me about the light? Can you describe the light? The actual physical light.
What was that?
The actual physical light that is lighting this set. What is it?
It's close to the camera because there's harsh shadows.
What does being close to the camera have to do with harsh shadows?
The distance.
Well, if the camera, you're telling me if the camera is a foot away from that you put the light right next to that. Say what?
The light, sorry.
That's okay. What about, so can you take it from the top again? What about the light?
It's close to the subject, which is producing harsh shadows onto the background.
Is that true for everyone else? You guys all agree with that?
No, it's like a small light because it's high contrast.
And is it really close to this set?
Farther away.
How far away?
There's not a lot of fallout, but it's also like close up. I'm not sure, I don't know, like 10 feet? I don't know.
Yeah. So the trick to this is, it is the smallest light he can lay his hands on, and it's as far away from this set as he can possibly get it. Remember, guys, what we are talking about, this goes back to exactly the very first thing we said today. What controls contrast? Read your rule.
Size of the light.
What controls size?
Distance and relativity.
So we know, look at how fucking sharp those edges are. That couldn't be more contrasty. So what does that mean? What kind of light do I have? Big or little?
Little.
Close or far?
Far.
Exactly. Is this beginning to sink in?
Mm-hmm.
This, to me, is an anti-still life. It's not gross like the chickens that were doing each other. This is actually something else entirely, and something that I think is extremely beautiful. So at any rate, does this sort of make sense what I'm talking about, anti-still life? There's another quick little slideshow that you guys can watch, so please do. And I can't get out of this without...
Push escape on your keyboard.
I know, but the escape on my keyboard also tries to get me to stop my screen sharing. So at any rate, as we go down here, if you want to get into inverse square law explained again, that'll tell you right here. There's a bunch of stuff in here about view camera movements. We can't get to that right now. I do have a view camera here, and possibly during one of our things, I will go over view camera and movements. But this is really the one thing that I knew we would not be able to really explore here in the studio. But to be truthfully honest with you guys, there's a lot of, most people don't use view camera any longer. If there's anybody in this group that does want to learn view camera, or at least explore it, and we don't get to it in this class, I promise you I will get together with you as soon as we can get back into the studio, and I will spend the weekend or whatever it takes to get you guys through view camera. So anyway, just so that you know where that's at. This is the last thing that I wanted to really show you, and it is this 17 tools for styling. This is a woman who does a lot of YouTube videos about shooting food. She has some very clever ideas about stuff to use. This explains the C1 Pro overlay tool, so you'll know how to actually work with that. This again is the same file that I already gave you. This is the tear sheet file with black type. This is the one with white type. This food styling tips and tricks. Some of these are actually really good, so I just want to take a quick peek at them, and it'll only take us 5 minutes, and then we'll actually be done on time. This will be the very first class that I've had this semester that ended on time. So at any rate, depending on what you guys are thinking about shooting, these are things to actually think and that you might want to consider doing. So if you take an antacid like an Alka-Seltzer and you drop it into soda, sodas actually die on set. So when you're working with sodas on set, they die. You break up things of Alka-Seltzer, so you've got just little pieces of it, and you keep dropping them in, and it will get your soda to refizz again. And you can read through the rest of these things. Boot polish that's rubbed on char grilled food. Nobody really uses boot polish anymore. People use what's called a kitchen bouquet. So go to Jewel, go to, it's going to be in the, it'll be near the spice aisle, whatever. It's a little jar of kitchen, it's called kitchen bouquet. And it's basically to color gravy. You take it, you dilute it, you mix it down, and then you paint it on. So if you want the most beautiful roasted chicken, those things are usually only half cooked, and then they're painted on using kitchen bouquet. So it's a great thing for actually darkening anything. There's a whole bunch of things here that you can read through this and talk about this. I'm going to show you a couple other things. Here they talk about using mashed potatoes as a replacement for ice cream. Most people don't do that. Most people will actually take lard. So go get a thing of Crisco, mix sugar into it, because the sugar that you mix into the Crisco will give it the coarse texture that you get with ice cream. And then you've got something that you can put on your set that will never melt and that you can actually light with, and it looks just like ice cream. You can add food coloring to make it strawberry ice cream. You can actually add real strawberries to it to make it strawberry ice cream that's got real strawberries in it. It's thinking like that. Lily had actually come to me, and in her treatment, she had said for her food shoot that she wanted to use smoothies. And she said one of the challenges that she was going to have shooting those was that she was going to have to go to the smoothie place to get the smoothies and then bring them back to her place to actually shoot. And by the time she got back to her place, the smoothie would have melted and died and all of it. And I said, you are absolutely right. That is not what you want to do. You people need to start thinking about lying a whole lot better than you are. So if you want to shoot smoothies, don't go get a smoothie. You need to think about the replacement for the smoothie. So what would replace the smoothie, and what would really hold its texture? What would be something that would be cheap that you can get your hand on that would hold its texture? So for me, I'm thinking Greek yogurt. That's what I would do. I would go get a thing of Greek yogurt, maybe dilute it down with a little bit of water, mix it up, and it should hang forever. And then she can add a little food coloring to make the minty one and a little food coloring to make the strawberry one. Is this making sense to you guys in terms of thinking about this kind of stuff? So it's a lot like that. I'm going to show you one last thing here just to tell you, so to convince you that nobody does this shit for real, or at least not as much as they say they do. So this is more visual. We'll take, again, 2 minutes here, and then we'll actually jump out of this. So I'm going to zip this open just a little bit more. So a few things to actually help. In terms of making your stuff shine, there are 2 tricks. The hairspray trick is actually a really good one because, again, it will put essentially a coat of lacquer on whatever it is you're shooting. One of the things that I gave you in my list was a small bottle of glycerin. Glycerin is what everybody uses to make food look glossy. So with a glycerin, it's usually mixed either 1 to 3, so 1 part glycerin, 3 parts water, or 1 to 2. You'll find out what actually really works for you. But the advantage of glycerin is that it is clear and that it doesn't evaporate. So the big deal, if you want to, for instance, have a bottle that looks really frosty to make it look really cold, you know, the beer can to make it look really cold, that kind of stuff. People put glycerin, diluted glycerin, in a little spritzer bottle, and they spritz it onto the can. It will never go away. It will actually dry in place, and you'll have that little beading on that can for the next 50 years if you want to leave it there. It never goes away. So it's a really good thing to have. You don't have to keep reapplying it. Other people will dilute it a little bit more, and they'll take a pastry brush or a paintbrush, a big paintbrush, and they'll paint the top of a hamburger to give a hamburger gloss. I can tell you the number of people in this class, in past versions of this class, that shoot the deadest, ugliest, driest, most unappealing fucking hamburger you could possibly imagine. And I always look at them and say, would you fucking eat that? I wouldn't. That's not even an anti-still life. That is just some ugly, dried up, brown, dead piece of crap. And no. However, if you hit it with a coat of glycerin, and then what kind of light would you use to get it to shine? The same type that you might use to get metal to shine. And what would that be? Have you guys already forgotten our first assignment? Direct reflection, right? That's how they get those hot spots on hamburgers to make them look really juicy and inviting and all that kind of stuff. You hit it with something that will cause it to be glossy, glycerin and water, and then you put backlights or wherever your lights actually need to be in order to cast direct reflection coming from the glycerin hamburger that you just placed. Does that make sense? It's the same thing for fruit. It's the same thing for any of that stuff. If you want it to look glossy, hit it with a coat of glycerin, but then you need to orient either your lighting or the subject both together to create direct reflections. Is that making sense to all of you guys? You remember that part?
Yeah.
Okay, all right, just want to make sure about that. We're almost done, guys. I just want to go through a couple other things right here. People do tricks like this all the time. They use motor oil instead of real syrup. And the reason, again, that you use motor oil is it won't soak into the pancakes. Some people will tell you to use Elmer's glue instead of milk. That does not work. Do not do that. If you need really thick milk, get cream. If you need it to be thicker, you can add gelatin to the cream. There's all sorts of things, but this is the way that you need to start thinking about all of this and doing food. Are we good? So take a look through this stuff. If there's anything that comes up that you know you're going to shoot specifically and you're struggling with it and you don't understand how you want it to have this effect or whatever, let me know. If you want a coffee cup to look steamy, get a stick of incense, light the stick of incense, wave it right around the top of the coffee cup till it starts to, the smoke starts to rise from it. Whip the stick of incense out and hit your shutter, and you've got steaming hot coffee. If you need the little bubbles around the edge of a coffee cup, because again, it gives some life to it and some interest to it, you use canned air and you shoot it inside the coffee and it'll cause it to bubble around the edges. Some people will actually take dish soap, put it in a glass, stir it so that you create bubbles, and then take a straw, suck a small part of those bubbles up, and then blow them around the edge of your coffee cup to sort of give it that bubbly sort of, that like freshly brewed kind of coffee kind of thing. Making sense? It's all about line. All right, are there any questions about any of this?
Do you have any quick tips for like bakery items?
In terms of what? What are you like? What are you nervous? What do you see as the challenge?
I guess just making them look like tasty, but I think the glycerin and direct reflection thing would probably be good for that to make it look like.
That helps a lot. If you need something to actually look. So for instance, like some croissants do not have a sheen or a gloss to them. Some of them do. Some of them actually have had an egg wash that's been put on them when they got baked. So the glycerin thing would help that. But your biggest, without a question, for doing bakery stuff, your biggest friend is kitchen bouquet, diluted kitchen bouquet, and a small paintbrush so that you can paint the browning on it wherever you want it. So if you get something that it doesn't look the way you want it, the edges weren't browned correctly, whatever. The other thing is that you need to be discriminating about when you go to buy this shit. Don't just go in there and say, oh, okay, I'm just gonna grab a thing of croissants and I'm good to go. You need to shop through that shit. There's a famous story about Guy Bourdin trying to do a picture with a girl, and he wanted a very specific color of pea, and he bought 86 boxes of peas to find the right one. I'm not suggesting you guys go out and buy 86 boxes of croissants.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Anything else, guys?
So we are shooting food next week in class.
And we are doing it the week after as well.
Okay. So the one with the border around it, is that for the assignment we're doing?
It is.
Okay.
So if we look at the assignment, we'll look at that really quickly, guys, and then I swear to God, I'm going to let you go. I think it's in here, but if not, I'll find out where it is. Okay, so these are just things for you to consider. It can go way beyond this, but these were just, I just to plant some ideas in there. So bakery items, fruit, vegetables, pastries, all of this is stuff that you don't have to cook. If you want to cook stuff, that's fine, go right ahead and do it, but it's just a challenge. If you are going to say, want to make a cheeseburger and you're going to do that, you wait until you get your entire setup. Do not get a cheeseburger, get a regular hamburger and a regular thing of Kraft cheese singles that are not melted, and you lay it on there. You do your entire composition. You get all of your lighting correct. You get everything looking perfectly, and then you take a hair dryer to the cheese to melt it, and you shoot like crazy, because once it melts the first time, it will never look as good the next time. You have to rip the cheese off and do another one. But that's how to think about doing those sorts of things. So the objective to create a unified body of work containing 4 unique pieces to encourage a commercial client to hire you. It should be campaign focused, meaning they need to relate to one another in the way you actually shoot it. One of your images, you should create light from photographic inspiration that is not your own. So I'm just asking you to go look at tear sheets and try to knock something off. Oh, okay, that's how. Again, I'm never gonna know, so it doesn't, don't sweat that one too much. One of your images should be concept driven. Think about what each of your images should actually be that way. So, and this is what's due down here. One image must be shot attached to layout. That's the one that's going to be the cover. That's the one that's going to have the, the holiday thing around it. So even, guys, it doesn't have to be a holiday thing. If you're shooting cottage cheese, I don't really think of holiday. I'm not concerned that your subject matter fits a holiday theme. That's not what this is about. What I'm concerned is that your composition fits a predetermined space that is a challenge for you to get your composition to work in that space because of the text and the type. One must be anti-still life. We've already looked at that. One would be to recreate daylight in the studio. I think we did a pretty good job of that today. And then again, one should be to recreate lighting inspiration that's not your own. Now, I'm not ever gonna really know that. I'm just asking you to think about lighting by looking at other lighting and saying, oh, I really love that Irving Penn picture. How on earth did he create that lighting? And now, hopefully, you have a better idea. We good? Any more questions? All right, guys, have a good rest of your day. If anything comes up, let me know. Other than that, I will see you guys next week. We will go into the same thing that we did last time. I just basically hit rooms and you will go in. So you'll have somebody, a partner, and you can either talk to them and deal with them or help them or not or whatever. That's just how that whole thing goes. You guys had a pretty good sense of how that all went down.
But I will be running around the room and we will be going from there. And I will see you guys soon.
Okay.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Thank you.
Sure.